Hello, this is the first part of Imperfection by Neon Zangetsu. Link will be in the description. All author's notes have been removed between chapters. Also, any NSFW scene will be removed. This part will cover chapter 1 to 6. Activation deep within the confines of his laboratory, Doctor. Jiro scrambled to awaken his greatest creations before it was too late. Goku's friends were hot on his heels, determined to oust him, to deny him the revenge he so justly deserved. The thought that they might discover his hidden laboratory at any moment was enough to smother his euphoria in more immediate fear. They were bound to find him sooner or later, but they mustn't. Not yet. Not when he was so close. The thought troubled him. He continued his work, fingers clacking relentlessly the keys imputing the necessary data needed to activate his ultimate android, greater perhaps, even than the as of yet unborn cell. If this somehow succeeded, if he managed to activate him, he'd see those fools suffer the defeat they deserved. If he failed, well, his dream of revenge would surely die with him. But that did not matter. Androids 17 and 18 aside, the unit he was about to activate was a model unlike any other ever created. It housed ungodly powers that could destroy the Earth itself. Were it his choice, he'd rather have left this one inactive until he could make the final adjustments. Until he could fully cleanse the last trace of the host body's insufferable personality. As it were, he had no other choice. He'd taken the DNA of a man long since dead, a powerful warrior, and cloned him from the base up. At first, the results were catastrophic. To bring a man back from the dead, to truly revive him, was to bring back soul and body as well, resurrecting his memories alongside him. To say it had been nothing short of utter disaster would have been an understatement. Countless statistics had gone into the earlier models, until at long last he'd found a way to suppress the memories of the host subject and bend its will to his own, at least in theory. And thus, #21 had been born. Despite his earlier failures, he'd finally succeeded. Unlike the other clones, he'd successfully managed to bring this man back from the dead. But oh no, he hadn't stopped there. It wasn't enough to merely resurrect such a powerful warrior. How else could he secure his loyalty? Upon doing so, he'd painstakingly converted his body from human to android, utilizing a power source hereto unheard of. The boy had energies of his own. A great and powerful creature had once been sealed inside of him, and remnants of its power remained. The energy replenished over time, growing stronger from every use. Not an energy absorption model, but neither was this android a product of the eternal energy device. He did not hold the DNA of the world's greatest fighters as Cell did. Nor did he need them, because he held techniques of his own. Terrible techniques. Powerful attacks the like of which he'd never seen. Neither was #21 trapped at the basic level of a cyborg, because he was still somewhat human, despite all the awful alterations the wicked doctor had inflicted upon his restored body. He would become more powerful in time. Win or lose, the latter being highly unlikely, with each battle he fought, his battle power would slowly increase, not unlike those pesky scions. But now was not the time to contemplate the potential consequences of his actions. Now was the time to release greatness. At last, Doctor. Jiro tittered to himself as he inputted the final equation, thereby triggering the activation sequence. My greatest creation. Jiro felt rather than heard the destruction of his door, but the fools were too late. Even as they burst into HISLAB, Jiro had already prepared the final calculations. The steel coffin housing #21 had already drifted open not a mere moments before, presenting him with the much-needed opportunity to awaken #17 and #18 as well. With his remote, he'd simply disable them again, if they proved to be troublesome. A maddened, gleeful giggle fled from his withered lips as he watched their containment pods slide open, revealing the seemingly innocuous figures within. Between the three of them, these pathetic mortals stood no chance. None at all. Where am I? The hoarse sound of young man's voice drew Dr. Jiro's attention. His gaze drifted back toward #21E S-Pod. Blue eyes the color of winter skies drifted open. A flawless, whiskered face framed by shaggy blonde locks. His body was bound in a flamboyant attire, a pair of loose-fitting black cargo pants and boots, completed by an open orange vest showing off his slim physique. A strange metal plate remained wrapped around the length of his right arm, as though someone had tried to carve the likeness of a leaf into the metal with only a limited success. Silence prevailed as he pulled himself out of the pod taking the Z-fighters in at a glance before sweeping through the remainder of the room. He gravitated toward Jiro abruptly, pinioning the mad scientist him on his gaze. Another android? Trunks gawped at the resurrected blonde. What else is different this time around? But his words went unheard by the androids. Who are you? #21 demanded. I am your creator, Doctor, Jiro reminded the cyborg. I gave you life. The blonde paused, seemed to consider it, frowned. My life? He asked aloud, scratching at the back of his head. I don't remember my life. Jiro froze, mechanical joints stiffening in surprise. No! This unit wasn't functioning as he should. He still had his memories. A handful at the very least. The horrors inflicted upon during the procedure must have been too traumatic after all. He likely forgotten everything but his name, and probably most, if not all, of his techniques. He was useless like this. Well, what have we here? A sudden snatch of motion registered in Jiro's peripheral vision, forcing him to come about to face this newest threat. Androids #17 and #18 stared back at him. The former was smiling. The latter held the deactivation controller in hand. His deactivation controller. He reached out a trembling hand for the device as though he could somehow retrieve the precious instrument without subjecting himself to further bodily harm. Give that back! You mean this? Android 18 smiled sweetly, raising the controller out of reach. I think I'll hold on to it. She started to squeeze, exerting pressure upon the fragile components. Metal and plastic shrieked in angry protest, and Jiro blanched. No! He exclaimed aghast, gawping as a series of hairline fracture appeared and began to speed across the metal surface. Don't. For all his pleas of protest fell of deaf ears. 18 squeezed harder still, a cold smile breaking through her emotionless facade as the device began to crumble between her fingertips. Jiro lunged at her, desperate to save his precious controller. Too little, too late. With an ear-shattering crack, the remote exploded in #18's hand, sending the ruined remains clattering to the floor. Imbecile! Jiro screamed. Fools, the both of you. Do you have any idea how long it took for me to create that? Not really, no. 17 shrugged. His gaze slid toward #21, regarding the stoic android as though he were a shiny new toy. Hey, buddy. You're one of Jiro's newer models? The android frowned but did not honor them with a response. #17 frowned. He didn't like being ignored. Not one for words, are you? Let me try #17. His twin smiled knowingly. Hey, #21. His gaze drifted towards her like a stray breeze. You're kinda cute. She kissed him on the cheek then, eliciting a yelp of surprise from a certain bald warrior. Krillin felt as though he'd just lost something very, very important, and he didn't even know what it was. The blonde bastard. Damn him to hell. What the hell's she doing? If androids could have blushed, 18 was almost certain #21 would have been positively scarlet by now. As it were, the slight tensing of his shoulders was more than enough to indicate his surprise. Blue eyes flew wide in disbelief, as though he couldn't quite comprehend the reasons behind her actions. What was that for? He asked. So you can speak. #18 was overjoyed. I was beginning to think, Doctor. Jiro forgot to give you a voice box. I don't know what you're... Jiro watched their exchange and was suddenly fearful. The remote console was designed to deactivated androids #17 and #18. Their predecessor had no such shut-off switch. He'd known this, and still he'd activated him, hoping, praying that the flaw had been corrected. It had not. Azure orbs that once regarded him with cold confusion now wore an expression of open scorn. #21 did not recognize Jiro. Him! His master! Despite all that unfeeling circuitry that now existed where his heart had once been, the mad scientist felt a touch of concern and glimmer of fear. This wasn't happening. This was not happening! They were his creations. His life's work. They would obey. #21, he ordered, struggling to keep his voice calm. Kill the allies of Son Goku. Kill them at once. Blue eyes blazed with fire as the blonde's head snapped toward him. That's not my name. Nonsense. You're our android 21. The android shook his head for emphasis. My name is Naruto, he snarled. And I'm not an android. What madness was this? Was he in denial? I've already told you your name is #21. Jiro snapped back angrily. Now perform your function and dispose of them immediately. The blonde android crossed its arms and growled, it as a deep, throaty sound. Jiro was vaguely reminded of the likeness of a fox as those slitted eyes bored into him. No, Naruto scowled. Why should I listen to you? What? Before he could continue to argue with his greatest creation, an arm erupted through his chest. He stole a glance down at the one who'd struck him, peering down the length of his arm at the one who'd inflicted him with such humiliation. Hash 17 smiled back at him, utterly unconcerned with his creator's plight. Pain erupted through Jiro's circuits as the sleeved arm withdrew, taking a great deal of circuitry with it. He staggered half a step forward, clutching at his failing form at the oil leaking between his fingertips. No! This wasn't happening! This was not happening! How dare you? He seethed. I created you. I gave you life. You're not giving the orders anymore, old man, Hash 17 sneered. His gaze slid back to the taller cyborg, a cold smile twitching at the corner of his lips. You can kill him if you like, Hash 21. You've only just been reactivated for the first time after all. I'll let you do the honors. The whiskered android blinked in surprise. For the first time since his activation, he actually smiled. I think I just might take you up on that offer. Without warning, the blonde cyborg lunged forward and into the darkness and caught Jiro's throat in his grasp. Only the reinforced armor of his design kept his windpipe from being crushed in an instant. Hash 21 slammed Jiro into the concrete floor hard enough to dash any man's brains out. His bare fists pounded on the doctor's cowl with unbelievable force, blow after blow, smashing down like a jackhammer. Concussed and breathless, the good doctor could only writhe as his greatest creation struck at the most vulnerably part of his anatomy, the neck, holding his head together. It shattered like so much glass, his head flying free from the restraint of his body. It rolled to a halt at Krillin's feet, mouth working slowly, awkwardly. How could you? I gave you life. You took it away, was all they heard before Naruto's boot crashed down, dashing the glass jar to pieces against the floor. Grey matter oozed out from beneath his foot as the former shinobi ground it in deep, exacting his final revenge for the life that had been stolen from him. He stood woodenly, taking in the Z-fighters and their horrified expression. One purple-haired boy in particular looked about ready to snap. Now that he'd slain the man responsible for what he'd become, he felt nothing but complete and utter confusion. Where was he? Who was he? He clearly remembered his name, but beyond that, precious little. His last memory contained a blinding flash of light, and then nothing. His most recent memory was only minutes old, that of awakening here. Being told he was an android. Android? What the hell was an android? Was he supposed to be android or something? Ha! Ridiculous! As if... He risked a precursory glance over his shoulder, saw Hash 17 and Hash 18 investigating another of the sole remaining coffins. This one bore the number 16 upon its faceted door. Let's open it. Hash 17 decided. Fine be me. Hash 18 reached for the catch that would open the pod's door. Guys? Krillin asked, breaking the silence. Shouldn't we do something? Naruto spun around, his attention riveted upon the warriors facing him. He knew them, knew their names. They'd been forced into his brain, what little of it remained. Vegeta, Tien, Piccolo, Krillin. He knew them all. But the fifth member of their little quintet escaped him. Who was this boy? And why was his hair suddenly golden, oh dear? If they set that android free, it will be the end of all of us, he screamed. No! He'd just enough time to watch the boy's hair stand on end before a wave of golden enveloped him and came screaming into the cave. Blue eyes bulged. Snapped into scarlet. Unbidden, his hand lashed out to intercept the attack, the blast caroming harmlessly off his palm and into the one of the nearby computers, triggering a massive explosion. Fire and flame flowed around the blonde, leaving him unharmed even as Jiro's lab fell to pieces around his feet. Even his attire remained intact, but his body responded to the sight and flung himself backwards all the same. His feet did not touch the ground. Much to his disbelief, he found himself floating in mid-air completely off the ground. How the hell am I flying? He remembered precious little, but he certainly knew that he shouldn't be able to fly on a whim. He ascended regardless, alighting effortlessly beside Hash 17 and Hash 18, neither of whom sustained so much as a scratch from the raging flames below. 18 shot him a significant glance, wry with amusement. First time flying, I see? Naruto managed a numb nod. Don't worry, she reassured him. You'll get used to it. 18, are you going to open it or not? her twin complained. Fine, she huffed. Don't be so impatient. It was only then that Naruto truly became aware of the pod she still carried. With one arm, balanced delicately upon an open palm, she threw it to the ground. The refracted glass quivered from the impact. The occupant within did not emerge, however, not until his fellow android pressed a red button on the side of the pod. The door creaked open. A sharp kick from his fellow blonde assisted it in its ascent, revealing a great mountain of a man trapped within. Before he knew anything else, a blur of black and blue came hurtling toward him. He blinked in surprise, eyes bulging as black burst into gold and rammed him off the cliff. What the hell? He grappled with his attacker. A sharp blow to the head sent him skittering backwards. Father! He heard the purple-haired boy cry. What are you doing? We have to retreat. Stay out of this, Trunks, the prince shouted back. This is my battle. Battle? Naruto exclaimed, aghast, gawping at the golden-haired warrior before him. Wait a second, I don't want to… Vegeta's laugh silenced whatever else he might have said. Nice try. Without hesitation, he launched himself toward his enemy. His aura spreading out behind him like a golden curtain, he swooped at #21, drawing his fist back to deliver a knockout blow. His clenched knuckles flew at the blonde bot, who caught it easily with his bare hand, squeezing until the bones ground together. Not bad. Naruto heard a small voice note. Not a good punch by any means, but certainly not a bad punch either. These scions are stronger than we thought. Gah! Voices in my head. I've always been with you, fool, the voice cried out. Now, dirge! Grunting, Vegeta attempted a gut punch with his other fist, but the android effortlessly blocked the blow. He had indeed some formal training. He couldn't discern what exactly that sort of training that might have been, but whatever it was, it allowed the slim fighter to restrain him with only minimal effort. Straining against the warrior, he'd no doubt of his abilities, now that's for certain. The Prince of all Saiyan resorted to the only other option left to him, dishonorable though it might have been. Vegeta's knee shot out like a rocket and into the blonde's groin, and for the first time since they'd met, the droid's smile vanished. Whereas he once would have felt intense, mind-boggling pain, there was only the faintest and slightest sensation of discomfort. That wasn't very nice, he growled. Neither is this, you pile of tin cans. Vegeta roared, wrenching his hand free from the man's hand and thrusting it upward, palm first. The blonde's head snapped backwards with the blow, his body reeling. But, much like a certain scion the prince had come to despise, the smile never quite left his face. He drew back half a pace, nothing more. Azure eyes gleamed brightly in the gloom before they suddenly snapped into a sickening shade of scarlet. Wiping a thin trickle of blood from his mouth, the reinvigorated blonde pinioned his opponent with a baleful glare. Eyes gleaming furiously, he flung up both hands and screamed, Will someone please tell me what's going on here? Chapter 2, Companion. Much to 18's ire, 17 chose to hijack a pink delivery van. Pink delivery van! The androids were currently cruising down the highway at moderate speeds, leaving her to grapple with the one foe even she could not hope to defeat, boredom. 16 refused to speak unless the matter pertained to Goku, and as 17 was driving, she found herself close to losing the battle. At a loss, she turned her machinations toward the last member of their ragtag little group. He'd been silent ever since defeating Vegeta. Dreadfully so. When the Saiyan prince refused to let him be, well, 21 hadn't taken kindly to that. He'd broken both the man's arms and nearly his neck before she and 17 finally peeled him off the Saiyan, effortlessly dispatching the remaining Z-fighters as though they were naught but powerless children. Only the bald-headed one had been left unharmed, left to quiver in fear as they departed in search of what 17 believed to be fun. And by fun, they'd decided to find and kill Goku. Well, 17 had decided. 16 had agreed, and #21 really didn't seem to care one way or the other, forcing 18 to relent. Now, bored out of her mind, and with lack of anything better to do, 18 brought the full weight of her attentions to bear upon the sullen soldier. If he noticed her crystal blue eyes bearing down upon him, then he made precious little mention of it. His knees remained tucked into his chest, and he appeared to be staring listlessly out the window. Sorrow stained his reflection as he stared through the glass, those deep, azure orbs full of… So, she began, sidling up to #21. Naruto, right? When no response was immediately forthcoming, she pushed herself a little closer, allowing her assets to brush against his back ever so slightly. Most men would have melted at such contact and become putty in her hands. The android didn't so much as bat an eyelash. Stubborn. 18 shared that trait with her twin, but whereas 17 would have lashed out in an attempt to try and elicit a response, her ways were more subtle. Hello. She elbowed him in the side. Naruto? The blonde merely inclined his head minutely. Do you remember anything? She asked, pressing him for information. About your life before? 18 honestly couldn't care less about her life, but she was eager to learn more about the enigmatic android. They were both blonde after all, and blondes had to stick together. That, and she really didn't have anything better to do than listen to his life story, assuming he remembered any of it. He'd exploded into a fit of fury when Vegeta insulted him, so she knew he didn't take insults lightly. Save that, she knew precious little of their newest companion. Hello! She waved a hand before his face when Naruto refused to honor her with a response. Naruto? Anyone home in there? Silence was her answer. 18 scowled. Are you going to keep ignoring me? Or do I have to kiss you again? She threatened, eyes gleaming. When he still refused to respond, she made good on the threat, and then some. Leaning forward, 18 cupped his face with both hands and forced him to look at her. Naruto blinked in surprise, a sound of confusion leaving his lips, only to be muffed by hers. Blue eyes bulged as her lips covered his, pressing against for what would later be known as the longest instant in all of his eternity. That evoked a reaction. A flustered Naruto squirmed out of her rip seconds later, nearly knocking 16 down in his haste to escape his fellow blonde and her luscious lips. The stoic android spared his predecessor a piteous glance as he took shelter behind him, as though he too sympathized with the blonde's plight. 17 simply snickered from the driver's seat as his sister resolutely climbed into the back of the van after the bashful bot. Having fun back there, Blondie? Shut up! Naruto's cry could be heard halfway across the world. He glared bloody red daggers at 18 as she set it in beside him. Will you please stop doing that? He begged. Why? 18 teased as she stroked his chin, eliciting a rise out of the blonde. Don't you like it? Of course I do. The whiskered hand clamped a hand over his mouth. Ah! He exclaimed aghast, struggling to control the rising flush in his cheeks. I didn't say that. Did you, or didn't you? I don't remember. Naruto clutched at his head. That is understandable, number 21. 16 spoke suddenly. You were activated before your repairs were completed. 17 stole a glance back at them through the rearview mirror. Big guy say what now? 18 shushed him. Did you say something, 16? The older model nodded. By my calculations, you are not yet in your perfect form. The gentle giant replied flatly, gazing intently at the whiskered blonde. The true depth of your power and most likely your memory is still very much hidden from you. Naruto and 18 exchanged a significant glance, but it was the former who gawped back at the big guy. Perfect form? He remembered no such thing. Then again, he didn't remember becoming an android either. His head throbbed anew and he clutched at it. Bastard! A cacophony of voices screamed at him, searing his ears with profane accusations. Demon brat! Why won't you die? Yuto? He risked a glance up at her, suddenly aware of his knees clenched into his chest of the tears staining his cheeks. Strange. Androids didn't cry. Did they? His fellow blonde must have laid a hand upon his shoulder while he was out of it, because her eyes shone with concern. Those soft, pale blue eyes. They reminded him of someone. A flash of nostalgia washed over him, accompanied by the scent of roses, though there none to be found in the van. Those eyes, those beautiful, wonderful eyes. Ah! Agony stabbed at him anew, smothering the memory in more immediate pain. He whimpered. It hurt! Gods, it hurt so much. 16, what's wrong with him? 18 asked. He is not yet complete, the giant repeated. His body is lacking in crucial components. What does that mean? Naruto forced himself to raise his gaze and listen to their conversation. Both blondes blinked. Perfect form? Doctor. Jiro intended model #21 to unite with multiple beings. 16 continued. For this reason, he refrained from awakening him until those beings were present. Naruto nearly fell over. And how do you know this? Because I am one of the beings with whom you must unite. 16 said this as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Your memories will likely remain in flux until we are joined, as will your pain. This time, Naruto really did fall over. What? He gawped. You mean I'm supposed to unite with you? Yes. Doing so will unlock great power within you. 16 nodded. However, I refuse to do so until I have killed Goku. No need to hurry. Naruto flung up his hands. I'm perfectly happy as myself, thank you very much. A tiny smile broke out on his chiseled face, like a crack etching along a stone surface. You say this, and yet you do not know yourself. I know enough to trust 18, Naruto said without thinking. 18 looked at Naruto, wide-eyed. What? Shut up! He cast a desperate glance at 17, who had thus far remained silent despite their argument. Which way is Goku, anyway? 17 raised his shoulders in a helpless shrug. Your guess is as good as 16's. North, came the immediate reply. If you say so. Naruto said nothing as 17 banked a hard right, the act of which jarred 18 against him. He really was grateful for their company. Had he woken and found himself alone, he'd probably be wandering the wilderness or something. With them, he had a purpose, vague thought it might be. Naruto didn't much know or care about this Son Goku. His only solace was that the man they sought might hold some knowledge of who he really was. The unlikelihood of a Saiyan knowing anything about him was painfully frank, but what else had he to cling to? You could try becoming complete. Shut up, he hissed back at the voice. You might claim to know me, but I sure as hell don't remember you. Kit, I said shut up. Fine. He could taste the venom in the word. Let me know when you're in a better mood. I won't be. He folded his arms and sulked. Completion. And yet the words nagged. Perfect form. He didn't much care about perfection. Not when he had so much more to worry about. Part of him, his programming urged him to unite with these beings at any cost. Naruto carefully iggled it. Why did he have to listen to the old man? He was dead. And yet his legacy persisted. Abruptly, the thought of regaining his memories left Naruto cold. What if he was a bad person? He'd initially assumed he was an ally of good, and yet here they were traveling to kill a man he knew nothing about save his battle data. If these thoughts in his head were merely his own desires seeking to make themselves manifest, what then? What would he do when he finally remembered? He shivered, numbed by the idea. 18 made a face. Something wrong? He asked reluctantly. We've got to get you some new clothes, she decided. What's wrong with what I'm wearing now? He liked black and orange. He remembered that much. Aside from being utterly hideous. She trailed a finger across his chest, teasing. No, I think you'd look better in red. Maybe blue? Naruto paused, considering. Blue was his favorite color. Hey! He hadn't been able to remember that before. Were his memories already beginning to return? No, that couldn't be. Attempting to make of the situation, he forced a smile to his lips. As long as you get a new A outfit too. Apparently it was both the wrong and right thing to say. Wrong, because he couldn't help but flirt with her. Right, because her eyes danced with delight at the prospect of getting a new set of clothes. A sudden sense of nostalgia struck him. Much to his dismay, she banished it with her lips, kissing him ever so softly upon the cheek. I'm seriously starting to like you, Blondie. Naruto bristled. My name is Naruto. One question remained, however, as they sped down the highway. Who am I? Chapter 3. The nightmare begins. The Z-Fighters had been defeated, beaten, decimated at the hands of the androids, taken apart like a gang of weaklings, humiliated by a single being, the latter of which remained responsible for the embarrassment of a single Saiyan prince. Sadly, said prince was not taking his losses very well. This is absurd, Vegeta snarled, grinding his molars together with enough force to draw blood. How could I, the prince of all Saiyans, be beaten by a mere machine? A tin toaster, no less. It was ridiculous. Absurd. He had attained this newfound power and for what? Only to be beaten like an impudent child at the hands of a teenage piece of tin. Just thinking of it made his blood boil, caused his newly healed wounds to ache all over again, forced him to remember how easily the blonde had broken his arms and would have broken his neck if those other two hadn't pried him off at the last instant. All that training and for what? He'd been picked to pieces. Pieces! Darn him. The prince could feel his rage building again, but he was powerless to stop it, this time. Damn him! His kai began to rise involuntarily, his eyes flecking with jade, hair staining itself gold. It wasn't long at all before the golden aura took a hold of him, transforming him into a super saiyan. The earth quivered beneath his feet, the cliff upon which he'd perched himself crumbling away as the energy continued to build and build and build, rising to an almost feverish pitch. "Damn you, android!" His howl of rage could be heard across the wastelands. "Wait until I get my hands on you. I'll tear you apart." Trunks shared his father's sentiment. He remained likewise baffled by the presence of these two new androids, put off by the possibility that his actions might have somehow polluted the time stream. Now he could only look on. Father was trying to figure out how to ascend to the next level of Super Saiyan out here in the middle of nowhere, and Trunks alongside him. Sighing, he decided to broach the subject once more. "Father." "Be quiet, boy," Vegeta snarled, his brow tight with barely suppressed anger. "I did not need your help then, nor do I now." Suffice to say, it wasn't going well. Trunks shook his head, knowing better than to test his progenitor's patience. Piccolo had departed swiftly after their defeat, departing for parts unknown. Trunks honestly had no idea what the Namekian was up to, and to be honest, he didn't have time to care. He had no way of knowing that Piccolo had gone to fuse with Kami. There are far more pressing concerns weighing down on his mind, like the androids, and Goku, whether or not he would recover from the heart virus this time. Too many events were in flux, and he felt as if he were to blame. But if he hadn't gone back, the future would have remained as it was and everyone would have died. Those thoughts niggled at him, plaguing him with doubt. What horrors could those fiends possibly be up to now, many hours later, miles away? "Well, this isn't awkward at all." 17's snide remark earned him a baleful glare from both blondes, burning like a pair of well-placed energy blasts in the back. 18 wanted to kill her twin. Naruto didn't. He wanted to flay 17 into little tiny pieces, scatter his circuits across the road, then stomp them to pieces. Perhaps 18's idea was the more sound. His was certainly more painful. Their present situation had come about after dispatching a ruthless biker gang at the nearby mall. The fools thought they'd found themselves a good time, foolishly harassing what they assumed to be a pair of harmless teenagers. Inside, they'd found a pair of irate androids, one of whom had not taken kindly to having her shopping spree interrupted. One obliterated mall later, and 18's new clothes were in complete tatters, much to her utter dismay. Naruto, being the gentleman that he was, saw fit to lend her his jacket. Of course, he'd failed to account for the fact that this would leave his upper torso largely exposed, thereby granting the latter an unrestricted view of his bare chest and the like. And then there had been the scars. Until moments ago, she'd marvelled at them, been fascinated by them, wondering what could have possibly been done to him to create such a tapestry of lines and loops along his back and chest. It certainly wasn't from the doctor's procedure. Jiro was nothing if not a perfectionist. No, these scars came from another time, another life, and whatever had carved them into his flesh must have been powerful. So powerful. Not even the demented doctor had been able to erase them. Even now she could still see it, faint line running lengthwise over his ribs, where something had pierced his lung long ago. What a life he must have lived. She'd tried to coax a few memories out of him, to see what he did remember. It wasn't much. His memories were foggy, his powers and prowess even more so. But, gradually, bit by bit, she'd been able to help him try to and remember. It hadn't been easy. His memories were painful, jagged things, rooted deep in his subconscious. The going was slow and uneasy for a while. He was clearly reluctant to remember, and who could blame a man like him for wanting to forget such a painful past? She'd scooted closer to him then, and then her boneheaded brother had stuck his nose in and ruined everything. 710, I swear. All right, 17 shrugged. Have it your way, sis. But I suggest you loosen up before you rust woe. His gaze snapped back to the road and his legs slammed the brakes, jarring everyone forward into their seats in a tangle of arms and legs. Hey, look, a house. Is this the place? 16. Yes, the hulking android answered from the back of the van. This is Goku's dwelling. Well then, you heard the man. 17 could barely keep the smile from his visage as he opened his door. Everybody out. They clamoured out of the van, grateful to stretch their legs after spending so much time on the road. 18 was disappointed. Somehow she'd expected, well, more. There's no way this is it. She peered over her twin's shoulder, her anger momentarily forgotten in the wake of their arrival. I mean, look at it. It's downright puny. Goku's house wasn't really worth looking at. Really, it wasn't. It was more of a rotund hut than anything else. Smoke could be seen rising from the chimney, evidence that someone was at home, or, if they weren't, then they'd certainly left in a hurry. Goku is not here. 16's announcement brought everyone up short, confirming her suspicions. I cannot sense him. What do you mean you can't sense him? 17 asked, dumbfounded. I thought you said he was here. He was, their compatriot replied. Someone moved him. Abruptly, his steely gaze clouded, narrowing upon the horizon. But I do sense another power nearby. A great power, one I do not recognize. We should leave now. Immediately. Without pause or preamble, he performed an abrupt about-face, turning toward the direction of their van. It is no longer safe here. Run away if you want. 17 snorted as he peered inside. I'm not leaving until I know for certain Goku isn't here. Naruto chuckled. It was a soft sound, barely a snicker. Finally, something we agree on. Damned straight. The pair bumped fists, enjoying their newfound camaraderie. 18 would have found it charming if she wasn't still sulking over her twin's behavior. I advise escape. 16 repeated, undaunted in the face of their ignorance. This power is stronger than you, 17. Much stronger. Nonsense. 17 wouldn't have any of it, and neither, it seemed, would Naruto. I'm the strongest fighter there is. Naruto might be a close second to me, but no one is stronger than I am. Besides, it's not like they can sense us. Right, sis? Hey! I'm trying to talk to you here. 18 was barely aware of the boys and their argument. She had far more important matters on her mind. She left them to their search. She was far more interested in acquiring new clothes anyway. 17 was right about one thing, though. Whatever power was approaching, it couldn't possibly sense them, and even if it did, they outnumbered it, 4-1. They had nothing to fear from this, whatever it was. Soon thereafter, she found what she was looking for in a nearby closet. Clothes! Finally! Within minutes, she'd all but discarded her tattered rags in favor of a new, if not slightly dated, ensemble. She'd chosen a black vest with white undershirt, blue jeans with a golden chain, black gloves with a gold bracelet on the left one, and black flats with orange socks. They fit rather well, meshed with her body in all the right places, but even so, it dawned on her that these clothes were meant to be worn by a young woman. Not the middle-aged woman that was doubtlessly Son Goku's wife. Whoever owns these clothes should have their optic sensors adjusted, she murmured, twirling the necklace against her finger. They are obviously malfunctioning. I don't know, a voice drifted up from the doorway. They look kinda good on you. 18 turned to face the newcomer, and her jaw nearly dropped clean off her face. Naruto, what are you wearing? Her deadpan was barely concealed. What? He protested. Is it so wrong that I like wearing blue and orange? 18 didn't have a response for that. Naruto had discarded the attire given to him by Dr. Jiro. In its place, he now wore Goku's distinctive blue-orange guy, wristbands, and boots, having obviously pilfered the latter from the man's closet. The sole exception was that blasted headband he seemed intent on carrying around with him. It dangled around his neck like a badge of honor, its scarred and pitted surface glinting dully in the afternoon's light. Naruto had already admitted he didn't know what to make of the leaf symbol etched into its surface, only that he felt more secure when wearing it. It certainly didn't detract from that outlandish outfit. At first, it was all 18 could do not to snicker at this change in wardrobe. He looked just like Goku. How ridiculous. How? Then she noticed just how well the GI seemed to fit Naruto, accentuating his muscles in all the right places, giving her a perfect view of those lean, strong arms. He wasn't overly muscled like the Saiyans, because he didn't need to be. All his powers came from within, power he was still remembering and only just learning to tap back into. But 18 had to admit, she really did like a man in uniform. So, what do you think? 18 didn't know what to say. She didn't want to compliment him, but she didn't want to lie and insult him either. Truth be told, once she got past the garish colours, she actually liked the uniform. But she could not let Naruto know that, else she'd never hear the end of it. Finally, she settled for a derisive snort. I suppose you could have done worse. Naruto's grin was positively beatific. Well, you don't look so bad yourself. That one brought a flush to 18's face. She was no stranger to compliments, having received a great deal many when she was still human. Yet somehow, hearing it from him, from his lips, it warmed her in places she didn't even know she had. Flatterer. She drew closer, her hip brushing against his. I try. His words were barely a whisper now, their lips brushing. That was when they heard it. Ah, hello, 17. Greetings. The voice was cold and reptilian. It sent a chill shooting down 18's spine, jarring them apart. 18 couldn't explain it, couldn't give name to this sudden fear shooting down her spine. All she knew was that she had to get away from here. Now, she looked to Naruto, half expecting to see the same fear written upon his visage, but no. There was no fear to be seen there, only confusion. The voice couldn't have come from within Goku's house, she realized. No, it came from without. 17! The thought stabbed at her with a sudden sense of dread. She didn't know why, but she was suddenly, terribly concerned for her twin. Naruto must have shared the same thought because he was already moving, stepping past her towards the door, his footsteps heavy with haste. He only made it 2 steps before a wave of golden light slammed into him, ripping him from his feet and sending him sprawling back into the kitchen. 18 barely had time to cry out before the light in the doorway died, blotted out by a creature straight from her nightmares. Monster. That was the first word that rose to 18's mind when she beheld it, this ghastly-looking creature, this thing standing between her and safety. It looked like nothing she'd ever seen before, all green and black spots, its beakish mouth twisted in sick satisfaction. And 17, her brother, bloodied, battered and beaten, was clutched within its tail, struggling for breath as the noose drew still tighter. 16 was nowhere to be seen beyond its bulky form. Had he been dispatched of as well? Ah, there you are, 18, the creature rasped, devilish in its delight. I was wondering where you are hiding. What are you? Ah, how rude of me. The abomination chortled softly, perversely pleased with itself. Wherever are my manners? My name is Cell. Its slitted eyes narrowed upon her. I'm here to welcome you to your destiny. That grotesque tail flicked once, casting 17 to the ground, drawing her attention toward her sibling, away from the creature. Pain. That was all 18 knew, before a knee crushed into her stomach, driving the breath from her lungs. Even as her body registered the pain, an elbow smashed across the back of her head, specklinic black spots before her vision. She tasted blood in her mouth, wondered why she hadn't hit the ground. The creature was holding her by the hem of her shirt, its slitted eyes mere millimeters from her own. A cackle rose from that beakish orifice which served as its mouth. Come now, 18, it chided, pulling her out of the house and into open air. Resistance is futile. Once I've finished with 17, you and I will become one. Like hell you will. 18 bucked free of Cell's grasp and dropped in the same instant that a streak of red light rushed over her head, snatching Cell up and driving a canyon into the ground. 18 didn't think, she only reacted. Her first thought was of Naruto. She ran to his side, picked her way through the rubble to find him, and saw the damage that had already been done. Her fellow blonde had partially extricated himself from the rubble that had one been Goku's house, which was a small miralse, in and of itself considering his condition. He was missing most of his right arm, the limb severed into a stump just below the elbow. And then, as she looked on, it returned. There could be no other word for it. The flesh of the arm simply chose that moment to writhe and bulge as though something were trying to claw its way out from within. Naruto grit his teeth and roared in pain, and within moments a new limb had sprouted from the detritus that had once been his elbow, now restored and whole. Gasping, he slumped back against the rubble, his visage streaked with soot and sweat. Must have sensed me. He was mumbling, and it was then that 18 realized how they'd been found. Naruto was far too human to not have an energy signature. It would have been easy for anyone to seek him out, considering his flawed inefficiency. He shook her off when she tried to help him up, muttering something about finding 16 and getting out of the way. I remember now, he hissed. That thing, its name is Cell. He was created to absorb 17 and you reach his perfect form. Rah! Cell burst from the ground in an explosion in a golden glow, wreathed in scuff marks and dirt, eyes narrow and intent upon them. He wasn't even fazed. For only the second time that day, 18 felt a touch of true terror in what was left of her heart. So the whiskered one is stronger than I thought, he hissed, intrigued by the sudden shift in the blondie's power. Interesting. His tail snaked out, its tip promising pain. I find this disturbance to be refreshing. He drew himself up to his full height and began to advance, his tri-pronged feet producing a relentless clack-clack-flack against the ground. Oh, yes. Ah, fuck. Naruto drew a deep breath and released it, daring to do something he daren't have done before. He stood woodenly, not taking enough care. He forced his mind to remove itself from the world around him, to distance itself from the conflict taking place deep in his heart. Everything faded to black and grey, all the thoughts clamouring inside his head, the sight of 18, Cell, even the forest, falling to the wayside. He reached deep inside himself and just let go. There was no physical thought to the action. Nay, he simply stopped thinking. Once he did so, Uzumaki Naruto, as he knew himself, simply ceased to be. Just like falling into a deep trance, he was still perfectly aware of himself and his surroundings. His viewpoint simply changed. Naruto was still there. He was simply slumbering. In his place stood the monstrosity doctor Jiro had made him out to be, Android 21. And this android did not feel fear. He recognized Cell for the monstrosity he was, just as he recognized he must be stopped. His feelings for #18 held no relevance in this matter. 18. He spoke calmly, coolly. I need you to do me a favor. What are you talking about? What she saw truly frightened her then, caused the words to dry up in her throat. It was his eyes. Naruto's eyes. No longer were they a gentle shade of sapphire. They had become scarlet and scornful, his pupils sinister and slitted. His expression seemed torn somewhere in the realm of sadness and sorrow, and for a moment she was truly frightened. Take 17 and get far away from here. Away from me. Now, before she could ask what he meant by that, he tossed his head back and screamed. Rah! Power flooded Naruto's veins, tongues of fire scrawling upward from every inch of his being. Crimson Kai bulged in his muscles, boosting his strength to Hiri to unheard-of levels, then further still. He was not as Android 16 was, he told himself. He was neither flesh nor machine, but something in between. A cyborg. And because he was neither fleur nor metal, he could utilize a power that he alone understood. Something not even a being such as Cell would anticipate. He was not constrained by the limits of flesh either, nor did he find himself hindered by the mechanical implants within his body. There would be only one chance at this. One chance, one instant to surprise him, and then it would all be over. Kayaken! Sapphire snapped into scarlet, his blue-black aura bleeding into a furious white-crimson as everyone looked on. Naruto didn't care. He gave himself over to it, unto his programming, allowed himself to fall into the cold calculations derived by the man who had brought him back from death and made him into this abomination. He felt his hands and feet shift in the most minute of movements, recreating the first phase of an offensive stance his mind did not know. His body did. It had been rebuilt from the ground up, created for the sole purpose of destroying Son Goku. Cell was hastening his pace now, starting aggressively towards Naruto in defiance of his purpose. Naruto no, wait, that wasn't right. He was Uzumaki Naruto no longer. Android #21 cast aside that purpose now and flung himself forward faster than even Doctor. Jiro's greatest creation could comprehend. Cell swiped a hand at him, but Naruto met his fist with one of his own, stopping him dead in his tracks. There was a moment of silence as the two androids leered at each other, peering at one another over their limbs. And then, that tentative silence was shattered by Naruto, his forehead jarring forward to meet Cell's own in a vicious headbutt. Impressive, Cell hissed as they strove against one another. It looks like the good doctor made a few improvements. It matters not, however. I will still kill you. Naruto's only response was a slight smile. Then the battle began. They descended upon one another in a storm of fists and feet, matching each other blow for blow. Cell gave as good as he got. For every successful strike, he drove home at least 2 or 3 more. Naruto could feel it, his rage, his humanity welling up underneath, and he drove it into his attacks until it was the aggressor who found himself on the defensive. For every strike, he found himself stymied, driven back by the sheery ferocity behind the blonder's assault, staggering as blow after blow battered through his defenses and into his armor to strike home at the flesh beneath. Still, the scales continued to tip until it was #21 attacking and Cell back on the defensive entirely. This is impossible. Cell thought. He's just as strong as I am. No, stronger. How can this be? Hash 21 and S smile grew another inch. What's wrong? He sneered, his head slipping a fraction of an inch aside mere moments before another punch missed him, then another still. I thought you were going to kill me. Silence. Time and time again, Cell's fist phased through empty air as the blonde ducked, backpedaled, tucked, and rolled. Each time, Cell found himself unable to strike the agile android. What trickery was this? This could not be happening, should not be happening. His design was meant to be superior. Bounded forward and drove his fist deep. Then, finally, the first true hit belonged to Hash 21. His clenched knuckles barreled into Cell's unsuspecting visage, smashing into the android's beak-like mouth with all the force of a pounding piston. But 21 wasn't done. Even as the grotesque creature moved to counter, he pulled back and struck yet again, burying his fist to the hilt in the android's stomach. There was a sickening, squelching sound, loud enough to make 18 cringe aside more out of disgust than any real pity. Nyah! Cell gagged, purple blood welling up at the corners of his lips. Still Hash 21 drove his fist deeper, forcing the monstrosity to a knee. Had enough? He asked. Hardly. Cell struck out with his tail, forced Naruto backwards, pursued with a vengeance. Blurs of green and orange streaked between branches, snapped into the skyline overhead. Sparks flew and the clouds began to darken overhead, drawn by the warrior's incredible power. 18 could barely follow any of their movements. They were moving far too fast for her optics to adjust. Such speed! It was all she could do to retrieve her twin and not stand in outright awe of their power, remain transfixed by the sight of the battle before her. To think Naruto had this much power! He was a veritable hurricane of energy, never stopping, never slowing, never letting up even for an instant. But how long could he last before Cell mounted back and counterattacked? 17 stirred against her then, his good eye fluttering open. The other was swollen shut, evidence of the beatings he'd taken at the hands of Cell. How he'd been trounced so soundly in a matter of moments truly was beyond her. Was this creature really that powerful? 18 risked a glance down at her sibling. It was a mistake. Scarce had she done so than a stray energy blast struck one of the nearby trees, then another and still another, sending the forest bursting into flames. Naruto and Cell were taking potshots at one another, heedless of their surroundings. Heedless of her. The thought stung something in her heart. Naruto seemed to have simply switched off. He had paid her little to no attention since his brawl with Cell began. Not that she blamed him, but the realization that he might not care what happened to her actually hurt. No! I can't tell myself that. She shot skyward on sheer instinct, looking as much to try and avoid the battle as the flames below. 17 clung to her, shoulder draped over her neck in an effort to retain his balance. The energy blasts had since ceased. The fighters were engaging in close combat once more, to Naruto's obvious advantage. The longer the battle dragged on, the more his power seemed to increase. He was beginning to pick Cell apart, she realized with a sudden pang of worry, toying with the android when he could have easily destroyed him. He was becoming arrogant in his power, allowing it to hold sway. Enough of this, Cell snarled, drawing his arms back. I am done toying with you, Hash 21. You're gone, and here's your going away present. Me, is that so? Naruto, to her disbelief, mimicked the motion. I was just thinking the same thing, Cell. His crimson aura surged furiously, the Kaioken empowering his body to suicidal levels. Slowly, he too drew his arms back, fangs crooked into claws. Azure fire shone between their cupped palms, a blinding brilliance, blazing bright. Ha! The twin Kamehamehas collided violently, warring with one another for supremacy. Just as quickly, they detonated, spraying black smoke billowing across the sky. 18 could still see Naruto, but Cell— Oh no! Cell snapped into existence behind him, his tail lancing out toward the unsuspecting blonde's chest. Gotcha! 18 wanted to cry out as she watched the monster's tail pierce Naruto's chest, but all that emerged was a whisper. No! Naruto hung there, eyes wide and bulging, and vanished. The afterimage dissipated, leaving Cell's tail hanging in empty air. Cell growled, scanning the inferno below for any sign of his quarry. Where the devil did he go? Behind you! The ultimate android managed a half-turn before the crimson-clad cyborg whispered into existence behind him, palm open, fingers splayed. A shining, spiraling sphere shone in the center of his hand, growing larger and larger with each second, keening and shrill. Cell grunted in surprise. That was the only sound he had time to even produce before he realized what was about to happen. He tried to dodge, he really did, but that shrieking sphere was streaking towards him far too fast to evade, and the edges of it were already licking at his tail. He had time enough to hear the name of the technique mere milliseconds before the world erupted into white in his peripherals, before he felt it tearing into his flesh. Rasen Shuriken! Chapter 4. Rebirth, Rasen Shuriken. 18 watched in awe as the shrieking sphere leapt from Naruto's palm to slam into Cell's back. At first, nothing happened. Then the shuriken began to expand, swelling to engulf the ultimate android from tail to toe, dragging him down and out like a kite from the sky. Cell screamed in absolute agony as the cell-shredding sphere tore at his flesh, catapulting him into the charred earth below. Even as he crashed into the canyon created by the Rasen Shuriken, Naruto was diving after him, plunging into the earth like a thunderbolt sent from on high. 18 had just enough time to glimpse a second, slightly smaller sphere, cradled in the blonde's palm before Naruto thrust it down into the ugly android's back. Odama Rasengan! A second, greater gust tore through what remained of the forest. Deprived of their oxygen, the fires found themselves forcibly extinguished, unable to sustain through lack of oxygen, leaving naught behind but charred earth. 18 tentatively set down upon the bleak, barren soil, peered at then into the crater where Cell's body lay. She saw nothing but ashes. Elation soared in her heart, leapt to her lips in a giddy grin. Cell was no match for Naruto. Whatever odd improvements Dr. Jiro had made to Naruto, they were obviously more than a match for him. Naruto, you did it! Why are you still here? His fury jarred her from her glee, shouting up at her from the crater. I told you to leave. Now! An attack of that caliber isn't enough to destroy Cell. Not completely. Her head snapped from side to side in disbelief, a puppet severed from its strings. What? No, that wasn't possible. Cell couldn't possibly be, you should have listened to your friend. 18 had just enough time to hear the dirt explode beneath her feet, to feel the shadow fall over her, to see Cell looming overhead. Naruto was right. Cell wasn't dead. The android was missing an arm and a leg, both of his wings, and almost half of his entire face, but he was still, incredibly, alive. His armor had been scraped raw in places, revealing the blood and circuitry beneath, but he was still alive. Alive, and his tail was descending. Too fast. Much too fast. No! 17 jerked free from his sister's grasp and slammed into 18, shouldering her aside mere moments before the monster's tail descended upon them. Instead of swallowing both androids as he'd intended, the cruel creature snared her sibling instead. In the blink of an eye, he sucked him down, engulfing her twin in the disgusting vacuum-like appendage. Cell roared in triumph, at least 18 assumed he was roaring. From half of his face missing, it sounded more like a rasping gurgle. Even as she thought to save 17, her brother was sucked up through the tail, drawn down to the androids waiting back. Fuck! She could feel her mouth working, cursing Cell, cursing herself for being Save instead of her brother. Everything. Fuck, fuck! You're next, my little peach. Cell's broken mouth curved in the rictus of a grimace as the bulge that was 17 neared his back. I'm going to gobble you up. 18 drew back in revulsion. Too late, Cell's remaining hand reached out and snared her by the arm. Cold. His fingers were like death, cold and icy, and he was pulling her towards him and... No, oh God, no, I don't want to be a part of that thing. No, 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 no. Naruto was suddenly there, interposing himself between her and Cell, ripping away the android's remaining limb in a shower of green viscous fluid. Bits of acid spattered his cheek, melting through to the circuitry and bone beneath. Naruto didn't so much as bat an eyelash. Instead, he flung a hand before Cell's face, fingers straight and rigid. 18 recognized the technique. She'd seen Vegeta use the very same move against them mere moments before Naruto had broken his arms. Suddenly it all made sense. Mimicry. Save for the Kaioken, Naruto had not been programmed with the greatest fighters' cells or their techniques. He was destined to learn from them, in the heat of combat. Just as he'd seen Cell's Kamehameha wave, so too had he seen Vegeta's Big Bang attack. The world erupted. There could be no other word for it. Cell stood there, prone and helpless, balanced upon his lone leg as the Big Bang ploughed into him, obliterating life as they knew it. A massive mushroom cloud rose up from the center of the explosion, spreading outward, turning over earth and sky in an overwhelming tide of destruction. Amidst it all, 18 felt herself rising, clearing the blast zone, drawn aloft by Naruto's arms. He was like a burning spectre in her eyes, a crimson typhoon just waiting to unleash its wrath upon its unsuspecting victims. She could hear him cursing, mumbling foul things beneath his breath as they streaked across the horizon. Away from 17, away from Cell. Tentatively, 18 risked a glance backwards and below, to where the latter's remains should be. Cell was still standing. Battered and beaten though he might be, his still-changing form was protected by a barrier of shimmering energy. 17's barrier. 18 felt her heart, what was left of it, plummet into her stomach. Naruto couldn't kill him. No one could. They had to run. To get away from this thing before it came after them next. Naruto drew her back as Cell began to glow, light pouring from his every orifice. The transformation had begun. It wouldn't be long now before it finished, before he came after them, came to claim her. Next. 21? Where the fuck have you been? Naruto's snarl dragged her from her self-loathing, alerted her to the presence of others. I could have used your help earlier. 18 started in surprise, startled, as 16 suddenly descended from the skies, pulling alongside them. And there, beside him, Piccolo! The Namek did not look pleased. In fact, it looked as though 16 had roughed him up a bit. Suddenly, his disappearance made perfect sense. Piccolo must have found them. 16 had fought him, and apparently won, by the look of it. What's he doing here? She accused. I'm not fond of this idea either, the Namekian grumbled. But anything's better than letting Cell have his way with you. Idea. 18 wasn't following any of this. If anything, she was even more baffled than before. Where had 16 been? Why was Piccolo here? What the devil was going on? As if sensing her thoughts, Naruto turned and slowed, as did 16. Both men came to an abrupt stop in mid-air, forcing her to emulate their actions. Why were they stopping? Surely they realized this was their only chance to escape. If so, you must leave this area with Piccolo immediately. As if on cue, 16 turned his gaze back towards the land below, toward the slowly transforming Cell. This may be your only chance for escape. What? I heard what you said, she snapped back. What I want to know is why. Wouldn't it be better if we all ran away together? And if he's with me, won't Cell be able to track us? He will not, 16 replied. We will destroy him here. We? Her word was falling apart around her ears. 16 couldn't possibly mean 18. Naruto was amazingly collected in the face of Cell's continuing transformation. I need you to do something else for me. No. Shiri's already shaking her head, already refusing. No, I won't do it. Do you hear me, Baka? I said I won't. You want to know what I plan to do, don't you? His expression was stony, uncompromising. Naruto turned to face his compatriot. I'll tell you. 16 and I are going to kill Cell. No! She was sputtering now, blubbering, terrified out of her mind. I'll fight with you. You will not. 16's reply was curt. You are the one Cell seeks to absorb. We cannot allow that. 16's right. Naruto's answer wasn't as strict, but it remained just as firm. Now is not the time. Now is the time, she corrected him. If we all attack now, together, we what? Naruto snapped, taking hold of her shoulders and shaking her bodily. We fight? We die. Even if all four of us attacked Cell now, right now, while he's still transforming, we wouldn't stand a chance. 16 and I are the only ones capable of doing this. I see that now. Why can't you? Because you're going to die and I don't want you to. In that moment, 18 would have given anything to take those words back. I don't want you to. She grabbed him by the GI and held on, refusing to let go, to let Naruto walk to his death. She knew she couldn't hold on forever, knew she had to let him go or risk being absorbed by Cell when he finally came after her. But she couldn't. Her feelings were pouring out of her now, in a tidal wave of emotion, refusing all her attempts to stymie them. 18. 18 nodded. Tears stood in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Be safe, all right? You know I can't promise that. Naruto shook his head. Well then, 18 didn't know why she kissed him. Only that she did. Only that she grabbed him by the face and lips were suddenly dragging against his. That suddenly he was kissing her back, her tongue tangling within mouth, and that should have been our first kiss, she whispered in his ear. I'm sorry it wasn't. Naruto didn't say anything, because he didn't need to. She could see just how don't die, she whispered. It's time. Piccolo was suddenly there, pulling her aside by the elbow. We've got a lot of ground to cover. 18 managed the barest of nods. And then she was gone, ascending into the sky like an angel. Naruto watched her go alongside 16, the slightest of smiles wreathing his features. A shockwave shook the ground seconds later, alerting them to what they had long since feared. Cell had completed his first transformation. Both androids cringed and began their descent to ground, knowing they were about to fight a futile bout, that they were giving their lives. But even so, they went to their deaths with pride in their hearts and smiles on their faces. And then Cell was suddenly there, appearing in a blast of light. Naruto felt a trickle of dread touch the nape of his neck. Fast! Cell was faster than before and far more powerful. He certainly looked different, and not in a good way. If anything, he was even more revolting than before. Its mottled green skin hadn't changed in the slightest, but it resembled a human now, instead of some mad, deranged insect, vaguely human save for that massive tail and those hideous fish lips. Ah! And then it spoke. Now then. Cell greeted in the brash, lisping voice that would so define his second form. Where were we, boy? All right. It looks like he hasn't noticed 18 yet. Naruto commended himself. Good. Let's keep it that way. We just need to stall him. I believe I was kicking your ass. He forced a smug smile to his face, the Kaioken surging around him to double. Then 4 times its normal strength. Red tinged the edges of his vision, blinding him to all else. He could take this still higher if he had to, but even the Kaioken had its limits. Yes, I remember. Cell smiled, his large lips twisting into a sneer. I think you're owed something for that. Is that so? Naruto feigned a shrug. You're going to have a hard time collecting if that's all the power you... Pain. Naruto barely had time to blink before he slammed backwards into the ground, careening head over heels with such force, the world was little more than a mottled blur in the back of his mind. He became dimly aware of a large welt rising on the right side of his face, but there was no recollection of Cell's attack anymore in his memory. When did he... Blue eyes bulged as a shadow fell over him, keeping pace with his rapid velocity. His mind switched off and his body reacted, twisting in mid-lunge, raising a forearm even as Cell struck out with his heel and drove him into the earth. Soil snapped angrily at his back, but the true pain came not from the impact, but from his right arm. Gah! All the bones and wires in that limb shattered like so much glass, unable to withstand the force of the blow. Naruto refused to cry out, even as he felt his regeneration take over. Cell would have struck out again had not a pair of hands seized his tail from behind and squeezed, ripping him off the ground and swinging with all their might. The android had all but an instant to cry out in surprise, then the hulking form of 16 flung him away from Naruto. No real damage was done to Cell, but it did give Naruto a welcome breather. Time to reclaim his footing. 16? He found himself gasping, thanks, I owe ya. Huh, Cell snorted. One more weakling won't make any difference. Is that so? Naruto exchanged a glance with 16. Can you get behind that freak while I distract him? He whispered. The gentle Goliath seemed to consider it for a moment. It is possible. Then here we go. Naruto snarled and boosted his aura higher, the crimson sparks of the Kaioken eating at the air around him. X5. No. Higher. X10. Higher. X20. His drew both arms back, cupping the palms of his hands together. Azure light filtered between his fingers once more, burning with such intensity that it actually scorched his skin. Ka! Cell began to advance, stalking forward in the face of the blinding brilliance. Naruto read his smug expression. He was overconfident, arrogant in his power. He thought this wasn't enough to stop him. And it might not be. He was well aware that the android was now several times stronger than him. But by God, me. They'd just see about that. Aha, me. Naruto felt the blood vessels in his eyes begin to burst, every ounce of his power focused into a single monumental blast. The charred soil crumbled beneath his feet, chunks of earth rising into the air as he poured more and more of his essence, his very being, into the attack. There was a good chance he could destroy the earth if he missed. But he would not miss. He could not miss. He would end Cell or die trying. Hopefully the former. He truly wanted to be with 18 after all, but if it meant he had to die to end this monster, that so be it. Now, Naruto growled, pausing in his chant. If you really want to test your strength, stay right where you are. Cell sneered, refusing to so much as flinch. Do your worst, boy. That's right, Baka. Naruto laughed. It was a fierce, throaty sound, devoid of mirth and joy. Stay right there. He'd do his worst, all right, and Cell would regret every second of it. I think I'll take you up on that offer. Without another, flung his hands forward, releasing the heavenly fire within. Ha! 18 felt it. She recognized the sudden upsurge in Naruto's energy, realized he must be pushing himself to his absolute limits. He wouldn't last much longer. It was almost enough to make her turn around right then and there. But Piccolo wouldn't have any of that. She knew the moment she tried to go back, nay, the very second she placed Naruto's safety above her own, the Namekian would be there to stop her. It broke her heart to leave Naruto and 16 behind to flee like a coward while they stayed behind. Even now she could feel herself slowing down, warring with herself, self-preservation bickering with what she felt toward her fellow blonde. Eventually the latter won out. I can't, she decided, her heart breaking with the realization, I just can't leave him there to die. She feinted to the right, and when the Namek moved to block her, she juked to the left instead. Caught off guard, Piccolo had only an instant to register the sudden fake-out before she cannoned into him, driving a foot deep into his stomach. And then she was gone, streaking back toward the island, toward the field of battle. Naruto! Idiot! Piccolo streaked after her, cursing Doctor, Jiro and his creations all the while. Ha! Cell didn't even bother to dodge. He simply stood there, still as a god, allowing the massive Kamehameha wave to envelop him. He braced himself, refusing to flinch as the fire tore through 17's barrier, scathed his armor and all but seared into his flesh. Such an effort would have easily ended him in his previous form. Now he was able to resist it, albeit with some effort. He stood firm and tall, his boots grinding into the ground as the wave passed over him, leaving his body seething but still very much alive. If this was all he could muster then, Hell Flash! A wave of golden light smashed into the android's unprotected flank, staggering him and tearing through his already trounced tail as though it were made of tissue paper. 16! A strangled grunt left Cell's lips as the appendage flopped loosely away from him. No matter, given the chance, he would simply regenerate a new one. But he might not have that chance if he continued to bask in this inferno. Roaring his fury in an explosive wave, he sent both combatants flying backwards merely by releasing his ki, dissipating their blasts in a shower of steam, blinding all on the island. Slowly, warily, he uncrossed his arms, leering at them both. Is that it? 16 took a hesitant step backwards. His power is greater than I feared. You gotta be kidding me. Naruto felt all his power abandon him, his stamina drained by the intense demands of the Kaioken. How could he survive that? Is he immortal? Even androids had their limits. He sank to his knees, gasping for breath. There's no way. His best just wasn't good enough. This was the end, then. He had nothing left to give. There's just no way he can still be alive. Afraid so. Cell struck down hard, driving the wedge of his clenched hand deep into the blonde's stomach, sheathing his arm in flesh and circuitry. He watched the boy's face twist in a rictus of agony seconds before the point of his hand emerged out the battered blonde's back amidst a shower of gore. Even as 16 turned to register the blonde's defeat, Cell raised his free hand, clenched the fingers into a fist. To his credit, 16 managed to dodge the worst of the blow. Instead of having his head torn from his shoulders by the blast, he merely lost a large portion of his skull instead. The Kie blast sent him skidding away from Naruto, still impaled upon Cella's hand. He held him there a moment longer, sneering down at the boy that had given him so much trouble. To think such a no-count had actually managed to impede him in his previous form. He was merely an insect now, the lowliest of worms when compared to this power. I'll squash him like a bug. Get away from him, you bastard! Pesky vagabonds. For what must have been the upteenth time that day, Cell found himself ambushed. A blast of pink keys smashed into his back, driving him forward half a pace. Snarling with sibilant fury, the ultimate android cast Naruto down, uncaring for his final fate. With the bothersome blonde out of his way, Cell raised his gaze to search the skies for the perpetrator. He couldn't sense his attackers anywhere nearby, which meant they were either suppressing their energy or… Aha! What he found there in the dark, cloudy horizon brought a delighted sneer to his visage. R18, Cell smiled. How good of you to return. This saves me the trouble of searching for you. 18 was beyond reasoning. She could see Naruto there on the ground, dying, feel him fading. The red of her anger took all sanity from her, replacing it with a boiling rage. She didn't care if Cell absorbed her. Didn't care if she died. All she cared, I am going to crush you and throw you into the wind. By all means, try. Naruto was dimly aware of his fellow blonde, watching her fling herself at Cell who, having yet to regenerate his tail, merely toyed with her. Idiot! A 21. He turned his head, alarmed to find 16 sprawled beside him. The android must have crawled to reach him. Sparks scrawled across his head, exposing damaged circuitry. He wasn't in much better shape. We must unite. Naruto managed a broken laugh and flopped onto his back. He was bleeding out. No amount of regeneration was going to save him. Not this time. Somehow he still found the strength to smile. If he was bleeding, then that meant he truly was mostly human. Somehow the thought made him smile. For 16 to suggest a thing like that, they must really be in bad shape, the two of them. Funny, I thought you just said something about allowing me to absorb you. I did. I must have hit my head harder than I thought. Naruto groaned, blood leaking through his clenched teeth. We're in no shape to… Place your hand on my chest for our union to transpire. 16 continued. Naruto sighed, flashed a fierce smile. Persistent bastard. If we unite, will I still be me? I do not know. 16 admitted. I expect only one of us will remain after the union, but you will gain great power. Power to rival Cell. Naruto pondered the matter a moment. He could feel Piccolo fighting alongside 18 now, giving his all to prevent the nearly complete android from reaching his final form. It was a losing battle. Though Hinamek put up a valiant fight, he was still no match for Cell. In a matter of moments, he would be defeated, and then 18 would be absorbed. He couldn't allow that. He just couldn't, even if it meant losing his very self. Then, slowly, tentatively, he placed a hand upon the android's armored chest. It's been real, 16. Much to his belief, the towering giant actually cracked a smile at that. Indeed. You guys were cool. The blonde chuckled, blood flecking his lips. So what happens now? 16 looked him square in the eye. This. At first, Naruto wondered what he meant. Oh. Then he felt it. Felt the tiny spark of consciousness within him begin to expand, swelling into a bright sun. He didn't have time to wonder at their union, even as it began. It simply happened. Blinding in its brilliance, it spread outward, encompassing himself and 16, devouring everything that made them separate individuals. Naruto was vaguely aware of his body being broken down, of his wounds disappearing, but it was as if he'd not felt any of them, as if were watching it happen to someone else, witnessing the event from afars, making them whole. 1. He felt the memories come flooding back. He stretched out his arms and embraced them like a long-lost friend. He felt pain and sorrow and joy and a love so fierce it shook him to his very core, took his very breath out of his lungs and left him speechless. Ah, yes. He'd loved before, loved and loved again. Their names escaped him, but their faces did not. He saw them and knew them and loved them, mourned that they were now forever out of his reach, eternally beyond his grasp. There were other memories too. 16's memories. There was a gentleness to the giant that astounded him, a willingness for peace that left him in stunned silence. He felt what remained of the android dissolve into their union, giving way to his personality, and he mourned the man's loss. The world was a darker place without him. Goodbye, my friend. That was when the transformation began, a wave of raw energy coursing through his veins, scouring him clean. He could feel his form changing, shifting, becoming taller, losing some of its more youthful features as he accepted the union and became a part of it. Naruto's thoughts began to shift then, gravitate toward a single point. 18. He could fight for her now, protect her, do what he could not do before. This time, he would be certain to crush Cell, and he would enjoy every instant of it. The universe itself held her breath, awaiting the birth of a new warrior. Clouds cleaved themselves in two, the entire island quaking beneath the long-awaited union of the two androids. Cell whirled away from 18 and Piccolo, eyes bulging. "What?" he sputtered his surprise. "What is this?" "It's unreal," Piccolo gasped. When the smoke cleared, Naruto and 16 were gone. Someone else stood in their place. His hair lay streaked with crimson, eyes of the purest sea blue. Every inch of him was chiseled, as though he'd been crafted, sculpted from the hardest granite. 7 shades of scintillating scarlet shone through around him, enveloping the warrior in a sinister shroud of golden crimson. He stepped forward, his pointed boots kicking up dust with every motion, his armored chest gleaming dully in the setting sun. His eyes riveted 18 where she stood, those mismatching eyes of sapphire and scarlet rooting her where she stood. "Naruto?" 18 asked. "Is that you?" The new warrior blinked. "Uzumaki Naruto." He spoke, his words flat and monotone. Classification: Shinobi Junin rank. Status: deceased. Much to 18's ire, the fused warrior continued to rattle of a list of facts and data, his words never quite breaking from those simple statements. Techniques: Shadow Clone Jutsu. Rasengan. Rasen Shuriken. Sage Mode. No knowledge of Genjutsu. Limited knowledge of Taijutsu. Time of death: unknown. Age of death: unknown. Romantical attachments: classified. A tiny smile broke out on his chiseled face like a crack etching along a stone surface. "It seems you were right after all, 16. Gone were the flat, emotionless words of a machine, replaced with the amused candor of a hardened warrior. This power, it's incredible. Before #18 could begin to wonder just what her fellow blonde meant, the island began to tremble. It started slowly at first, pebbles twitching beneath her feet, soil shivering as if from a distant explosion. Crimson sparks split the sky, arching across the expanse between them, leaving her hair standing on end. Naruto threw back his head and roared aloud, a furious crimson aura enveloping his body. Skies darkened and seas shook. The very earth itself seemed to tremble in the wake of his power. Cliffs buckled. Laughter ended his brief display of power. Blue eyes the colour of winter skies and blood-soaked plains fixated upon Cell and pinioned him on their gaze, levelling him with an icy stare. "Cell," he began slowly, "I'm going to enjoy tearing you apart. Unless you'd like to surrender." "What, to a piece of junk like you?" came the creature's answering cackle. "No, I think I'll see what you have to offer, my dear boy." He chortled softly. "You may have united with 16, but that still doesn't make you stronger than me, and I'll prove it." He began beckoning with 2 fingers, the very gesture dripping with condescension. "Here, I'll even give you a free shot. I suggest you make the most of it." Naruto said nothing, but he struck like a serpent, yelling his fury and giving his body the sharp counter-twist that made his kicks so blindingly fast and powerful. Even 18, who was looking straight at him, barely saw the strike. Naruto's shin, a flawless fusion of flesh and metal, crushed against Cell's knee. Crushed it backward. The crunching squish of a joint being obliterated split the sudden silence. Piccolo choked in surprise, a sentiment 18 shared all too well. Cell crumpled to the ground, gawping, gasping, eyes agape. "What have you done?" he shouted at Naruto, aghast, clutching at the ruined limb. "What? Have you done?" "You gave me a free shot," Naruto said loudly, coolly. "My knee! My knee!" Cell started blubbering. From the sound of his voice, he hadn't been expecting this. 18 certainly hadn't. We just might have a chance after all," Piccolo murmured. The bio-android continued to writhe on the ground, hissing and screeching its pain. Naruto's voice was cool, mechanical. "Surrender is once again recommended." "Never!" He stepped forward, the punch lightning fast. He hit air as the android grabbed hold of his arm and drove a fist into his ribcage. The blow knocked the wind out of him. Blood poured from the orange orifice that was his mouth as he felt his lung collapse. Nevertheless, the insectine warrior charged up a ki blast and fired it at point-blank range at Naruto's head. When the smoke cleared, he found the blonde standing to one side of the blast zone, his features hard and unblinking. Cell was promptly punished for his temerity with a punch to the gut and a chop that split his humerus. The arm fell limp as the battered warrior nevertheless pressed the attack. His strikes encountered only air as the fused warrior let his offensive strategy take a back seat, armored boots shifting every so slightly against the grass, sidestepping every blow. Every kick was countered and every punch parried. "Hold still," Cell snarled. Naruto, rather, the warrior he'd become, simply smiled and vanished into thin air, leaving Cell followed seconds later. Thunderous blows rocked the land and sea. Lightning severed the sky. 18 gawped at the sight. Where on earth are they getting all that power? Naruto and Cell continued to trade thunderous blows, shockwaves of energy releasing with every hit. Simultaneously, both fighters landed hard punches to the face, sending one another flying back at speeds shattering the sound barrier. Naruto smashed into the ground while Cell crashed into the sea at the edge of the island. The former recovered quickly and flew above where his opponent had fallen into the ocean. His mismatched gaze roamed across the still waters, waiting for any sign of his opponent to emerge. "Cell!" he thundered. "Get out here. I know that's not enough to kill you." A streak of golden light answered him. Naruto swatted it away with the back of a hand as though it were a child's blast. He had just enough time to register a streak of mottled green and black, and then the haze of the fight was upon him once more. Cell gave as good as he got. A rabbit punch slammed into Naruto's solar plexus in the same instant that the blonde's fist smashed into the android's throat. They paid no attention to this, to their surroundings, to anything else but each other. There was only the fight, only the kill. At last they broke apart to lick their wounds, regarding one another with baleful eyes. "A valiant effort, 21, Cell replied, dabbing a bit of blood off his jaw. "But you'll need to more than unite with a pile of scrap if you expect to beat me." Naruto growled. "This time I'll rip off your head." He lunged forward to do just that, and froze. An overwhelming power hung over their heads, dwarfing their newfound strength. Naruto couldn't believe it. Cell couldn't either. They'd been so engrossed in their fight that they hadn't noticed its approach now until it was already too late. Naruto swallowed, trying to drown his dread, but to no avail. Where had such energy come from? And who could possibly be wielding it? Warily, he raised his gaze, turned his head to regard the sudden intrusion, to discover the perpetrator. Oh no. Well. Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, fresh from the hyperbolic time chamber, sneered down at them both. "What do we have here? Another pair of tin toasters for the scrap heap." His smile grew another inch. "Now then, which one of you wants to die first?" Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The Nightmare Never Ends. Well, shit. Such were Naruto's words as beheld the Prince of all Saiyans and his son Trunks hanging over their heads like a pair of grim reapers, harbingers of doom come for his head. One look at them was more than enough to tell him these were not the same Sai, and he'd beaten a day before. They were stronger. He didn't know how, but somehow. Father and son were stronger than him. He had yet to truly test the ultimate limit of his new form, but facing a pair of souped-up Super Saiyans wasn't exactly high on his to-do list either. He might win in any event, but he'd probably come out so battered that he'd be easy pickings for Cell. No, he couldn't do that. Besides, he reminded himself, he wasn't here to fight Vegeta, or Trunks for that matter. His purpose, nay, his only reason for existing at this very instant, was 18. She wasn't just his precious person. She was the precious person. The reason he had first cast aside his doubt and learned to fly, the catalyst behind his merger with 16. He wasn't afraid of what might happen if Cell got his hands on her. He was plumb terrified of losing her in general. He risked a glance back at the bio-android, determined not to let him out of his sight. Cell didn't seem to share any of his fears, however. He looked more bemused than any sort of shocked. Did he truly think himself unbeatable? Naruto wondered. Or did he simply lack common sense? He was beginning to think it was the latter. But he himself was not beyond reproach. He'd failed to sense their coming until it was far too late. Their pitched battle had carried them far from Goku's house to this remote island. There was absolutely no chance of escaping a pair of Super Saiyans intact. Not when he had to safeguard 18. You could always absorb her, that dark little voice in his head suggested. Naruto froze. The thought had never occurred to him. If he were to absorb 18, not only would Cell be unable to complete his evolution, But he himself would become far more powerful. No, he wouldn't. He mustn't. Is that you, boy? Super Vegeta laughed, scoffing down at Naruto, utterly unaware of the blonde's own struggle. Looks like you've gotten a little stronger since we last met. But then again, so have I. Naruto jerked backwards half of a second before Vegeta materialized in front of him, sneering in his arrogance. Surprise? His right arm snapped up like a pulley cannoning into the blonde's unprotected stomach before he could think to raise his Kaioken, before he could guard himself against the sudden strike. Gah! The blonde choked in surprise as the Saiyan's arm sank into his stomach, sheathing itself to the elbow. A white-hot haze of pain erupted across his vision, the kaleidoscope of colours blinding in their agony, driving him to his knees. What the fuck? Blood dribbled between his lips and suddenly it was all he could do to stand. When did you get so strong? Vegeta laughed at him. Simple, he said. Push-ups, sit-ups and plenty of juice. Behind him, 18 cried out. It was the only warning Naruto had before Vegeta hit him again. Motherfucker! That punch made Cell's last attack look weak. However, despite himself, Naruto chuckled. Just as Vegeta's punch had harmed him, so too had it roused him. Awoken something deep inside his heart. Something dark, bleak. Unbidden, a memory flashed through his mind. The Chidori slamming into his lungs, searing through flesh and bone, those malevolent red eyes leering up at him as he was hoisted off his feet. Ah! Vegeta struck again, jarring Naruto from the memory, bringing him that much closer to death's door. What the hell was going on here? Why couldn't he fight back? His muscles weren't working the way they were supposed to. He could feel himself being beaten down, feel Cell watching from the side, savouring, revelling his humiliation. His only solace was that his predecessor hadn't taken advantage of this opportunity to try absorb 18 yet. But he would soon. Soon? If he didn't stand up, if he didn't do something, I know this isn't enough to stop you, Dobe. A voice pierced him amidst the pain, seeming to stretch out as if from a great distance, seeming to speak from across the void. Slowly his body came into focus. Then his face. Raven hair. Eyes the colour of blood gazed back at him, narrow with contempt and scorn. A mouth that seemed fixed into what might have been a permanent scowl, quirked up now in a slight smirk. Oh crap! He wasn't dead, was he? No, the owner of the voice replied, reading the unspoken thought. You're not dead. Not yet. But you will be soon, if you don't do something about it. 21 tried to reply. Instead, he found himself overwhelmed by a powerful nostalgia. He knew this man, this spectre from the past. Get up! He felt a fist touch his forehead. What? This wasn't a memory anymore. He was really seeing this, feeling it. You were stronger than this when you killed me, weren't you? Abruptly, those eyes began to smoulder with inner fire, black flames licking at their edges. Use that strength, the stranger goaded. Protect your precious person. Don't let her die this time. Just like that, the stranger's name came roaring back to Naruto in tide of recognition, burning like a brand in the back of his mind. Sasuke, fight! The man demanded of him in parting, his form fading to the mists of Naruto's mind. Remind me why you still carry on. His body jerked back to life with a snarl, fingers fisting around Vegeta's wrists, flooded with power. The proud Saiyan must have sensed it, because his eyes widened a split second before Naruto latched onto him, holding tight onto his arms for all he was worth. A slight scowl twisted the prince's face when he realized he couldn't break free. Despite his best efforts, he was trapped. Had Naruto been able to see his own face, he would have noticed his eyes had changed. Mismatched irises were morphing into a golden honeyed yellow, pupils inverted, lids dusted the faintest shade of orange. Sage mode. Hey, Vegeta, he grinned. What do you get when you put a prince through a grinder? What? Naruto chuckled. It was a deep, throaty sound. No, Piccolo shouted, realizing what the merged cyborg meant to do. There was way too much energy surging through him. He erupted into the air, even as the android's entire body became burnished with streams of sinister scarlet. The fool! He'd destroy them all! Vegeta grimaced, renewing all attempts to extricate himself from Naruto's grasp, to no avail. The hell? Let's find out! Naruto flung both hands forward, blasting the prince from his feet with a blast of ki that 18 could only call monstrous. There was no other word for the sudden surge, the blinding crimson light that swept the proud off the ground and into the air. Before long, he was little more than a speck on the horizon, growing more and more distant with each passing second. Naruto watched him blast off, chest heaving from the exertion. 1 down, 2 to go. Piccolo was in awe. He no longer knew whether to consider the blonde enemy or ally. He was clearly many times stronger than him. After all, he'd just made mincemeat of Vegeta. It must have something to do with his eyes. The moment they'd changed, his power had skyrocketed. Unaware of the Namekian, Naruto threw back his head and howled. "I made a promise," he shouted at the top of his lungs. "I swore that I wouldn't let anyone touch her." Snarling, he rounded on Cell. "And that means you." "Boy," Cell slowly began, "do you really think you can—" Those were his last words. Enraged, Naruto flung his arm up towards the bio-android's dumb-faced expression. Cell's head exploded immediately in a shower of viscous purple fluid, his body remaining upright for a few seconds before falling onto the ground in a nerveless, quivering heap. 18 yelped in surprise, alarmed to find bits of gore spattering her cheeks. Had he done it then? Was the monster truly dead this time? Or had he only delayed the inevitable? Would Cell rise from the grave once more? Naruto. Naruto said nothing. Instead, he leered down at the corpse a moment longer also, wondering whether it would get up and attack again. It did have Piccolo's cells after all. Then he lashed out, driving a boot into the beast's belly, launching it from Thed Island and into the water. He watched Cell sink and raised a hand silently, savouring in victory. A blast of crimson ki burst from his splayed fingers, causing the water to erupt in a furious explosions, one after the other showering them with moisture. Dead or not, this placed the annoying android out of the fight for a few moments at the very least. Now if he could just get 18 out of here before Vegeta came back. Android! Fuck! Naruto managed a half-turn before he saw Vegeta hurtling towards him across the horizon, before the prince's knuckles rammed into his throat. Damn it! He just couldn't seem to catch a break today. Baffled, he swung his hand around in a circular parry and succeeded in nudging Vegeta's arm just enough that the next shot didn't punch straight through his head. Too little, too late. Vegeta had a hold of him now, and he wasn't about to let go of him for a silly thing such as honor. At the moment, Naruto realized he truly was becoming more human. If he was a true android, he wouldn't need to breathe. He wouldn't be blacking out right now. Not a bad shot, android. The prince hissed through clenched teeth. But this time, you're mine. Vegeta roared his triumph. A split second before a green, power-swollen fist smashed into his face. Sudden and unexpected, the strike sent the prince staggering, depriving him of his chokehold. He didn't appear to be injured. If anything, Vegeta was pleased. He finally had a chance to test his true powers. It seems Cell's a little bit stronger than I thought, he mused, dabbing a bit of blood from his lips. Likewise, Naruto bristled at the sight of his savior. Cell? As he'd secretly suspected, the android was still alive. Despite having his head blown off, Cell D's simply grown a new one, proving once more his rapid regeneration. Naruto half expected to find himself in for the fight of his life after decapitating the droid, but instead of striking him, the hideous creature favoured the blonde with an unnerving smile. "Don't misunderstand, brat," the bio-android hissed. "I'm the only one who's allowed to kill you. Besides," he sneered, "I find your new powers intriguing. Perhaps I should absorb you instead." Naruto shuddered. Gross. But he rolled his shoulders helplessly all the same. A plan had begun to form in the back of his mind. Cell's pride just might be his greatest weakness here. "You all right?" Naruto raised his hands, feigning the motion. "I'm much too weak to fight him. But if someone stronger were willing to—" Cell cracked out a laugh, the flames of his pride stoked by the blonde's words. "I think I will," he decided. "And then you will be mine, 21. "Yeah, just keep telling yourself that, buddy." Naruto held his ground, waiting, watching, wary as his predecessor rose to face the prince of all Saiyans. "Fool!" he thought to himself. The only thing Cell would accomplish would be his own demise. Still, he waited until he was certain the cruel cyborg intended to engage Vegeta in combat. Then, and only then, did he turn and take 18's hand. Looking back, he shouldn't have done it so suddenly, but at the time it had seemed to be the most prudent way to garner her attention. 18 squeaked, those Garant-coloured eyes flying wide with surprise. "Stop making strange noises." Naruto sputtered, cheeks flaming. "This is no time for blushing." Unable to help himself, he reached a hand up to stroke at her hair. "I told you I'd keep you safe, didn't I?" She nodded, a slow, tentative motion, looking as though she wanted to say more. "When all this is over," she murmured at last, "I owe you a date." Naruto actually laughed at that. "We're leaving," he replied. Without another word, they took to the skies, leaving the battlegrounds far behind, but not for long. "And where do you think you're going with that android?" Naruto hissed as he found their path barred by a golden blur. He knew that face anywhere. "Trunks!" "Stupid boy," he growled, placing himself between 18 and the Demi-Saiyan. "I don't want to fight you." Scarce had Naruto raised his gauntlets than he tasted blood in his mouth. In his previous form, such a punch would have sent him sprawling. Now he'd united with 16. The pain registered as an annoyance, more that of a feathers brush than the bone-wrenching gut punch it should have been. Of course he reprimanded himself as he slid half a pace backwards. There was no need for him to fear Trunks or Vegeta for that matter. He'd always had power in him. He just needed to bring it out, release it. Naruto did just that, delving deep into that bright place that was his consciousness, stretching out to the glowing thread that was very life force and grasping hold of it with his mind. He pulled, hard, raw power, powers gained from uniting with 16, coursed through like wildfire, leaving his tattered locks standing at attention on end. With his long blonde hair so rigid, one might have compared him to a Super Saiyan, but for the color of his eyes and his crimson aura. Naruto made no such comparison. Kaioken X50. Son Goku's once mighty technique surged through his veins, empowering, emboldening him. Whoa! Strain branched at the corners of his eyes as his body adjusted to the sudden surge of power, stabilized, metabolized it, and made it his own. Jiro truly was a genius for giving this technique to him. After absorbing 16, he could increase the Kaioken's power almost 100-fold. The thought brought a slow smile to his lips. Slowly he turned to face the son of Vegeta, basking in the fierce flare that was his power. Power. Such power. And it was all his. He could destroy the entire planet if he wanted to. Wait! Naruto forcibly reined himself in at the last, refusing to allow this newfound strength anywhere near his ego. No, he mustn't let it get the best of him. He didn't want to rule the world, or even destroy it, for that matter. All he wanted to do was protect 18. And if that meant killing a Saiyan, well, he had always known he would have to get his hands dirty eventually. Trunks. When Naruto spoke, his voice surprised him. It was a great deal dark, rougher than he'd remembered. "I know you. You're nowhere near as foolish as your father, so I'm going to give you one chance to back down. Let us leave. Better yet, help me destroy Cell. Do that, and I swear, you'll never hear from either of us again." For a moment, he really did think the half-Saiyan would listen to him. Then his expression hardened into one Naruto recognized all too well. Hatred. Trunks had suffered far too much at the hands of the androids to ever believe a word out of his mouth. Nothing he said now would convince him. He'd just see it as likely yet another trap and attack accordingly to what he perceived to be a ploy. Troublesome. "You don't believe me, do you?" he sighed. "Well then, I guess all that's left is for me to decide how I'm going to—" Trunks' response was to strike him, gloved knuckles slamming into Naruto's face, shattering bone, breaking capillaries. Or not. Although Trunks had indeed struck home against the cyborg's cheek, that was all he had done. Naruto stood stock still, face having turned ever so slightly from the strike unfazed from an attack meant to blow his head clear off his body. "Is that it?" he asked with a smile. "Impossible," Trunks thought to himself. "I put everything I had into that punch." It must be this red aura of his. Naruto's smile grew another inch. "My turn, boy." He struck down hard and fast, ramming his knee into the hybrid's stomach with a blow meant to break bone. Trunks gagged just before a flurry of fists and feet found his face and left him reeling. Naruto laughed at his plight and lunged at the half-Saiyan. And then they were gone, moving at speeds indiscernible by the naked eye. Piccolo, who'd managed to keep his distance from the twin conflicts thus far, found himself confounded. Shockwaves ripped through the air in sound succession, sundering sky and cloud alike as these two warriors, Cyborg and Saiyan, raged across the heavens in their own private war amidst the islands. "They're moving so fast," the Namekian marveled at them. "I can't even keep up with their speed." 18 also balked. Where was Naruto getting all this power? He kept saying he wanted to protect her. Was that what drove him to such lengths? For her sake? Idiot! She definitely owed him a date when this was all over. Maybe more. It never even occurred to her to pay attention to Vegeta's fight with Cell. To think that the bio-android knew the prince's greatest weakness. So ensorcelled was she by their battle that she failed to notice the shadow creeping up behind her, didn't realize that Vegeta had just made a deal with the devil in order to find himself a better fight. Lacking the energy-sensing abilities of her counterpart, 18 never realized her own peril until it was too late. Much too late. Naruto battled back against Trunks with gusto, hammering down on him with his larger size and superior speed. For once he actually found himself grateful to Dr. Jiro. If the Kaioken hadn't been inputted into his mind, he wouldn't be able to take this opponent apart so swiftly. And he was enjoying it. What better way to humiliate Vegeta than to beat down on his son? His design was truly superior. The longer their battle raged, the stronger he became. Soon enough, Trunks found himself on the defensive, unable to ward off the many blows as they rained down on his head. Now that Naruto was wielding Sage Mode and Kaioken in tandem, he was a veritable force of nature, and one to be reckoned with at that. Now it was time to end this. A blast of ki ripped the Saiyan from the sky and flung him to the rocky soil below, driving his body beneath the craggy surface like a splinter. What's wrong? He found himself laughing as smashed Trunks into the earth, towering over the boy's battered form. I thought you were going to destroy me. He reached down for him. The battered brat, who dared to stand in the way of their escape, seized him by the collar. His free hand opened, fingers splayed wide. Say goodnight, boy! Naruto! 18's scream jerked him back to the present. Naruto whipped around, ice water in his veins. His last sight of 18 was that of her terrified visage, her cobalt blue eyes growing wide and large as Cell's tail ruthlessly descended upon her and snared her from head to knee. Her legs kicked desperately against the air, struggling to find purchase where none was to be found. No. Time seemed to slow as he flung himself away from Trunks, turning his back on the defeated Saiyan in a desperate attempt to reach his beloved in time. No. Even for all his speed, he almost wasn't fast enough. By the time he reached Cell 18 was almost completely gone, but not entirely. His fingers closed around her feet with furious strength, the Kaioken bunching in and out of his muscles, lending him more strength than ever before. Spitting and swearing, he began to pull. Yes, inch by inch, he drew her back from oblivion, denying Cell his perfection. He could see her waist now, as he struggled against Jiro's creature, then her stomach. The massive monster roared an unintelligible curse and struck out at him, but to no avail. Naruto was stronger now. He no longer felt Cell's blows. He just needed a few more seconds to free 18. Wham! Vegeta came out of nowhere to strike him from behind, a crippling blow that nearly shattered his spine. Pain crackled up and down his back, driving him to the ground, denying him his grip. He tried to hold on, he really truly did, but the agony was everywhere, denying him the strength he needed to stop Cell from absorbing 18. Naruto screamed. It was a raw, hoarse sound. A cry of loss and sorrow, unmitigated ire and exasperation, and above all, powerlessness. He was forced to watch as Cell tirelessly sucked 18 back into his tail, the lump that was her body travelling down to his back. Stop it! He howled. Give her back! Stop your wailing, android! Vegeta snapped, stalking past him. You can have your bot back once I've finished with Cell. Damn you, Vegeta! Piccolo swore from above, watching the transformation begin. Oh, you've doomed us all. Doomed. Naruto lay there, forced to watch as the green dome of energy that was Cell's transformation continued to spread, laying waste to the island. 18. His poor, precious 18. She was gone now. He'd watched her die. He couldn't do that. He couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't let anyone else die because of him. I can feel it slipping. Something snapped. He could feel the last thread of his sanity stretching. His nerves were pulled like violin strings knobbed to their tightest. Slowly the strings drew close to shearing. Surely they began to snap. He had to get away now. Immediately. Flee before he lost all control, before this monster inside of him awoke. He had to. But his body wasn't listening. He was angry. So damnably angry. Self-control was slipping through his fingers, denying him escape. He couldn't stop it now. No one could. The power was coming out of him, and it would not stop until it had what it wanted. Destruction. Complete and absolute annihilation. The wind stirred around him, keening like a lost child. Naruto sobbed, great heaving gasps tearing their way out of his chest. 18 was gone, and it was all his fault. He'd thought he could protect her. He really had, but in the end, what had he done? Failed! He'd let his pride get the better of him, become too wrapped up in his battle with Trunks. It was stupid of him, so soul-searingly stupid. But perhaps he alone wasn't to blame for this catastrophe. Not just Cell, but Vegeta as well. Vegeta! Rage roared through him in an impossible tide, blotting out all else. He could feel it roaring through his veins, leaving his hair standing at end. Some small part of him knew what was going on and was baffled by it. He was a cyborg. How could this power be his? How could this be happening to a half-machine, half-human piece of junk? But the rest of him didn't care. It knew only that they had to pay. Cell must pay. Vegeta must pay as well. Pay in blood for what he'd done, for what he'd allowed to happen. Fingers dug booty troughs in the earth, unaware, uncaring of Cell's continued transformation. Won't let you. Unable to accept the strain, his body began to break, cracks scrawling themselves across every inch of him. Get away with this! Vegeta frowned. Where was this incredible ki coming from? From this tin toaster? Wary, he stepped back as Naruto regained his footing, his wounds slithering shut as though they'd never been. His body was trembling now, quivering with the effort needed to contain this unstoppable power. Cell must have felt it as well, because as Vegeta looked on, the ultimate android hastened to complete his transformation, luminescent energies streaming from his every pore. Naruto didn't care how many times Cell transformed, even if this new form was 10,000 forms stronger than him. It wouldn't make any difference to him. A single phrase echoed in the shinobi's mind, a saying of long ago of times past and gone. Out of darkness and into light. The demon has returned. Come back to fight. Naruto arched his head back and screamed. Rah! He could feel the transformation coming on now, sense the changes taking place deep inside of him. The circuitry installed by Dr. Jiro was gradually beginning to fade more and more. He was regaining his humanity. A creature of flesh and metal was being born of this union, granting him more power than he'd ever known, more than he knew what to do with. Naruto felt it burning beneath his veins, felt the sparks skittering around his body, his skin taking on an almost translucent golden glow, his hair growing longer, standing rigid and at attention. The skies darkened overhead, storm clouds flashing with golden lightning, heralding the rising of a new power. Mismatching irises blurred and blended together, sapphire and scarlet twisting into a sinister shade of violent violet. Sage mode blended with the vertical slits of Kurama's eyes, creating an eerie iris reminiscent of those deadly crosses for which the form was so well known. White cornea found themselves stained black. Darkness scrawled across every inch of him, warping at his frame, ushering him onward to his next form. And amidst this all, Naruto's body began to glow. Saffron swelling outward from his shoulders, enveloping him in a resplendent golden aura. The island itself quaked beneath their feet, destabilized from the twin transformation of Naruto and Cell. The latter was already completing his final evolution, but Naruto was nearly finished, his kai flaring to monstrous proportions. It's about time, Vegeta scoffed, eager for a fight. Maybe I'll finally get a decent warm-up out of this after all. Slowly the light around the androids dimmed. Naruto and Cell stood separate, but whereas the latter stood silent, the former had eyes only for the Prince of all Saiyans. Well now, said Prince sneered. Are you angry because you lost your little friend? Funny. I didn't think machines could feel love. I did love her, Naruto replied. But now I am death. I am the answer to all living things that cry out for vengeance. I am the sword of hatred, the darkness that smothers all. I am despair. Ally to 18. Nightmare to you. No longer am I known as Android 21. I am Super 21. Earth and air ruptured at his declaration, the black thunderclouds evaporating beneath his defiant shout. A few yards away, the now complete Cell offered a slight smile, his pale face taut with amusement. 21's Kai has increased significantly, he noted to himself. Perhaps I can test my complete power on him once he's finished Vegeta. The irony was not lost on him. Now that he'd united with 18, his power was nearly unmatched. He would enjoy this little battle immensely. What better way than to see the Prince of all Saiyans with his face in the mud? Ha! Naruto remained ignorant of Sell's attention. He remembered this. This form was eerily similar to the chakra cloak he donned after coming to an agreement with Kurama. His powers seemed to stretch on without end, an endless well of energy and strength into which he could delve at a moment's notice. All this was without the Kaioken. He could probably go X100 without even breaking a sweat now. And he wasn't even complete. He could feel that there were still flaws to his eye, and his eye alone remaining, denying him true perfection. But that didn't matter. What did matter was thus. Those who had allowed 18's death must be made to suffer. And suffer they would. Each and every one of them. But first there would be Vegeta. With this power, his power, revenge would be his. Yes, this form was one of vengeance. Its sole purpose, slaughter the Prince of Ali Saiyans. Chapter 6 Madness, wicked waves lapped at the shore of the idyllic island, causing still more of its land to crash into the sea. What had once been a fertile paradise had since been reduced to little more than a speck of arid soil upon the seas by the pitched battles that had taken place here. And still the water spat and churned. The ocean was eager to reclaim what had once belonged to it, and indeed it seemed it just might before the day was done, should the battle continue. And continue it must. Continue it would. 3 titans stood upon its barren soil. One was a pure-blooded Saiyan full of power and pride, the second an earthling-made cyborg, fueled by wrath and rage, and the third a terrible union somewhere between the two, a loathsome being devoid of sentiment or feeling, determined to eradicate the planet and all her inhabitants. Whomever walked away from this battle would hold the fate of Mother Earth in his hands. Piccolo knew this, and yet he couldn't keep his hands from trembling as he hung there in the sky. He was completely outclassed here. It was all he could do to watch the scene unfold and hope somehow that the world wouldn't end with its destruction. Gohan, Goku, you'd better hurry up in there, he silently urged his allies, knowing they must still have hours left to train in the hyperbolic time chamber. Because I think the Earth is going to lose no matter who wins this fight here today. Super Vegeta didn't care for the Earth Nay. He'd never been more thrilled in all his life. For once Kakarot was the furthest thing from his mind. Here he stood at the height of his power ready to do battle. And here standing before him were 2 powerful opponents, one of whom had just sworn to end him. Naruto's little power-up intrigued him. Originally, he'd let Cell absorb 18 for the purpose of fighting him. Now, the so-called ultimate android's perfect power didn't seem to be all he had made it out to be. He was just standing there with that strange little smile on that smug face of his, as though he knew something Vegeta didn't. Nonsense! He was the Prince of all Saiyans. None could compare to his newfound might. Naruto didn't share his opinion. His vision was red with rage, his newfound cloak swirling around him like a second skin, his hair standing jagged at attention. Had he any sense left at all, he might have realized the Saiyan cells implanted him by Doctor. Jiro were finally awakening, reacting to his rage to grant him a tier of newfound power. While not a Super Saiyan by blood, these powers, coupled with that of his own, lent his aura an eerie resemblance to that of a snarling kitsune. Fangs bared in defiance of the world and all that stood to oppose him, and his power was still rising. Much like Vegeta, he'd never felt so powerful in all his life. And yet all he could think of was vengeance. He could do so much good with this strength, but his mind, nay, his very soul refused to deviate from the path he had set before himself. Kill Vegeta. Maybe he'd be able to think straight once he ended the proud prince. Maybe not. Naruto knew only thus, if he didn't kill something, and soon, he was going to lose himself entirely. His mind was filled with foul thoughts of how he would break the prince. Killing him outright would be far too merciful. Of how he would demean him, debase him, make him suffer for his part in the loss of 18. Then, and only then, when he was on both knees and begging for his miserable wretched of a life, would Naruto end him. Perhaps not even then. Just the thought of it made him angry. Kill, 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 kill. Ironically, Cell sympathized with the blazing blonde. The now complete creation of Doctor. Jiro could barely restrain himself as he observed the standoff between Saiyan and Shinobi. He was eager to test himself against the victor of their little squabble. How frustrating it must be, he mused, To be so powerful and not have a worthy foe to test your strength against. While he could have easily attacked Vegeta before his counterpart, he waited instead to see the inevitable outcome of their fight. As if there was any doubt in the outcome. Even at a passing glance, he could see who the victor would be. The only question was, could they? As if sensing the blonde's agitation, Vegeta's glance swerved from Cell to Naruto. Nevertheless, this blonde intrigued him. He'd picked apart Trunks like he was nothing, and that was before the transformation. But he hadn't killed him. Far from it. Even now, the prince could see his only son struggling out of that crater in which he'd been left to die. No matter. His son was weak. He was not. He was Super Vegeta! Nothing could stop him. And he'd prove it. Right now. Just how long are you going to stand there and play the fool? Vegeta demanded, crossing both arms before his chest. Funny, I could have sworn you said something about making me pay. It was the wrong thing to say. Naruto stared at him for a long moment, his eyes narrowing to the merest of slits. You could feel the rage in his glare, such as it was, even tasted on your tongue. The scream when it came was mind-numbing. It tore at Vegeta's ears and ruptured the skyline itself, summoning the thunderclouds once more to darken the horizon for miles in every direction. Now what? Piccolo choked out. Even here in the sky, he could feel everything shaking. Unreal. Trunks ground out. And then, impossibly, Naruto began to transform again, his ki taking a sudden and unexpected jump. His already spiky mane seemed to grow even longer and jagged, saffron locks standing on end like jagged shards of glass. Muscles bulked up and bulged every so slightly beneath his orange-blue guy, causing the earth underfoot to crater, sending the debris rocketing away in all directions. There he goes again, Cell murmured to himself, silently awed by Naruto's display. Incredible! A dreadful thought plucked at his pride just then. Was this cyborg superior to him? An artificial union of Saiyan and Shinobi? He knew at once that this 21 was no mere human. No earthling could exude this amount of power. 21, was he a clone of one of Earth's guardians, perhaps the first guardian recreated from the ground up? A being forged with both cybernetics and cells, much like his own. But how could that be? This model had been created after him. To think even for a moment that the purity of his cells comprised solely of Saiyan and Shinobi, with minimal robotics, made this Naruto superior to him. Preposterous! Cell shook his head at the thought, refusing to believe that his complete power could possibly pale in comparison to this warrior. He would have his turn soon enough, and then he would prove that he was the strongest of all. In the universe! Ignorant to the thoughts of his predecessor, Naruto continued to change. Sapphire sparks scrawled across his form. Violet eyes began to blur and blend into an eerie shade of seafoam green, whilst the cross-shaped irises remained. Naruto didn't stop screaming, not even for an instant. Power poured from him like a river from a dam, blasting away all that stood before him. It lasted all of an instant, this second transformation, but the difference between this form and the last were like night and day. Lightning twitched and writhed around Naruto like a thing alive now, enshrouding him in otherworldly essence. An essence that far surpassed Vegeta's. He just didn't know it yet. And then it was done. The shinobi's scream cut off with a sharp snarl, his gaze snapped down to fix upon the proud Saiyan. Never. Vegeta. When Naruto at last lowered his gaze, when he finally spoke, the words were little more than a dry and barren rasp, emerging from a throat scraped hoarse and raw. I can never forgive you for what you've done. He started forward without another word, aura snapping and snarling at his feet, sparking with fierce intent. Those eerie eyes never left his, not even for a moment, crossed pupils angry and intent upon the proud prince, upon their prey. Despite himself, Vegeta felt just a touch intimidated. What am I feeling? He found himself taking a step backward in spite of his best efforts to stand fast. Fear? No, it can't be. I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. I am the best, the greatest. There's no way this piece of scrap can be better than... Me? His final word trailed off in a strangled as clenched knuckles barreled into his visage, bending bone and crushing capillaries. Trunks couldn't believe his eyes. Father! Vegeta only realized he'd been hit after his forehead kissed the stone floor, sending him sprawling in a way self-respecting Saiyan desired. Well, what's the matter, my dear prince? Now it was Naruto's turn to smile. But his was the stuff of madness. Any trace of civility had vanished with this transformation. You should be honored. You're going to be my first victim. The first one I crush, maim, slaughter. Isn't this what you wanted? His words rose into a laugh, and Vegeta half expected the blonde to charge in, guns blazing. Naruto did neither. Instead, he simply raised one hand and, advancing, uttered a single word with world-altering consequences. Bijudama. Vegeta had just enough time to register the word before a massive black sphere erupted before his vision, blotting out all else. Fast, he fired off a blast of his own in a vain attempt to block and overpower the blonde's technique, but to no avail. His Big Bang attack was swiftly swallowed up by the encroaching sphere. Damn it! He hadn't expected this. Desperate, he flung both hands forward, thinking to deflect Bijudama. That would prove to be his first mistake. His gloves smouldered away at its touch, searing into his fingers, into flesh and bone. I can't stop him. Of course you can't. Naruto's voice hissed soft and harsh from his flank, causing the prince's head to turn. Nothing can stop me now. Too little, too late. The madman was already behind him, a second blast cradled in the palm of his hand. No. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the self-entitled scion could only stand there, helpless as the sphere grew larger, then larger still. No, no, no! He knew what was coming, but with all his energy diverted into deflecting the Bijudama into preventing his own annihilation, he could no more best him than he could stop the sun from setting. No, 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 fuck! A scream tore its way out of the prince's throat a millisecond before the massive Rasengan ploughed into his back. Cho Odama Rasengan. Cell creaked open an eye, stifling a yawn as he beheld Vegeta's brutal battering. It had grown so boring he'd actually drifted off there for a moment. Just as he thought, Naruto was toying with the prince. He was intent to make him suffer as 18 had suffered. Wait, where had that thought come from? The ultimate android racked his brain, silently wondering. Was there still some semblance of 18 left over within him even after she'd been absorbed? No, that was nonsense. And even if there was some residual essence remaining, it wasn't as though she could do anything to stop him, right? Of course not. He was Cell. Vegeta's frustrated snarl bore down on him, reminding him that the prince didn't have that much time left. Naruto was taking the fight to him, bloodying the arrogant scion bit by brutal pit. Cell almost felt sorry for his plight. Almost, but not quite. Because the instant Vegeta fell, and he would fall, he would have the chance to test himself against this successor of his. Both Trunks and Vegeta had disappointed him. He was almost irated to find a challenge in another cyborg, to think that his cells would sing at the thought of facing this fool. Yes, soon it would be his turn. And then, he would show this boy true power. He was the ultimate. His power was maximum. Nothing could compare to him. Even as he thought this, it never once occurred to him that there might still be other androids. Leagues away, deep within the lifeless ruins of Dr. Jiro's lab, something stirred. Perhaps, had Krillin and Trunks been more thorough, this never would have happened. Perhaps if they were more complete in their curiosity, they would have discovered the bunker beneath the bunker. But they had not, and now, deep within the darkness, activated by the surge of energy that was 21. These creations, clone beings modified from the originals, were meant to react to one another. 21 was merely the first of several, and personality aside, was by far the most complete of these creations. But even an imperfect creation could awaken, as one did now. She woke with a start, her body bucking, her eyes flashing open. Her first thought was of suffocating, trapped in a tiny metal box that seemed several sizes too small for her. Her hands pressed against the cold steel. In an instant, she realized the horror of where she was. She was in a coffin. Let me out! Her feet lashed out, striking the metal lid of the canister. Of her coffin with enough force to warp steel and shatter stone, the canister sprang open with a sibilant hiss, the seals breaking to reveal nothing but darkness at first. Gradually her eyes began to adjust to the gloom in the room, revealing that she wasn't as alone as she'd first thought herself to be. Flickering lights registered in the distance, illuminating a massive supercomputer, the like of which she'd never. It was the source of the light, hard at work upon a series of coffins adjacent to her own. From here she could only just make out the numbers emblazoned upon them. 13, 14, 15, And there, lined up beside her in almost perfect order, were still others, their seals unbroken. 23, 24, 25. She cringed aside at the sight of them. Something deep inside screamed at her not to touch them. Damn it, but she wanted out of here. The woman lashed out once again, tearing through the debris with an iron fist, a single-mindedness that even Cell would have envied. Stone and gravel crumbled before the unintentional key blast, exposing her and hers to the light of day for the first time in a century. Dark eyes squinted against the sunlight, narrowing. Naruto. She could feel him fighting, feel his anger growing with each passing second. She barely knew who she was, where she came from, or how she'd come to be like this. It was all very much a blur. She was certain of only one thing. Naruto. She had to go to him. Now. Naruto. Android 22 turned in the direction of the energy, took her lip between her teeth, and began to rise. She did so slowly at first, but with growing confidence came strength, and it wasn't long before she was more than several miles into the air. This was so strange. It was as if she'd woken up after a long slumber, and yet the memory of flight was somehow there, ushering her on. I'm coming, Naruto. Murmuring his name for a final time, she streaked into the distance. Damn it! Vegeta hissed as he dragged himself out of the wreckage of a recently collapsed rock formation, one that had been standing moments before Naruto had hurled his body into it. Damn it, damn it, damn it! He stood on shaking legs as he raised his body back up to a more level position. His arms were quivering as he pointed it at Naruto, the slim cyborg's cold eyes glaring down from behind the vicious glow of his cloak and aura. Vegeta still couldn't seem to bring the boy down. Even after just landing a pair of Big Bang, the hybrid was still attacking him with a seemingly endless level of vitality. Nothing that Vegeta had done up to this point had seemed to faze Naruto, and it was starting to make him feel a touch uncomfortable. Your arms are trembling, Naruto's amused voice called out from behind clenched teeth. Vegeta! Humph! Vegeta countered sardonically as he forced them to stop trembling, and he straightened up as much as he could, puffing out his chest slightly. That's from excitement. I'm about to send you to hell, and these arms of mine know it. Really? Naruto asked before vanishing in a whisper, appearing directly in front of Vegeta. The Saiyan's teal-colored eyes widened as the cyborg in front of him brought a fist over his head. Let's test that then, shall we, short stuff? The hand came crashing down with tremendous speed, Vegeta barely being able to dodge the attack as it turned that particular section of the island into a pile of pebbles. He took off in a flash, hoping to place some distance between himself and the android and possibly fire off another Big Bang attack. The sound of a snarl suddenly filled his ears as the slender frame of Dr. Jiro's supposedly ultimate shinobi Saiyan warrior filled his peripheral vision. Vegeta snapped his head to the left, but the cyborg had already sprung his assault. The back of Naruto's hand swung up from below and slapped the prince into the air. Rasen Shuriken, Naruto said calmly as he jutted both his hands forward, a translucent shuriken of energy rocketing out of the center of his palms. The deadly spiraling sphere roared into the sky, slightly overtaking the afternoon sun in brightness as they shot up towards the flailing Saiyan. Big Bang attack! Vegeta yelled in retaliation as he swung his charred palm forward, the sphere of his attack shattering the cyborg's Rasen Shuriken into shards of harmless energy. Naruto quickly dodged out of the way, the blasts obliterating a few errant hairs as it passed by. The Golden Warrior looked down at the singed follicles and growled. Vegeta was already in front of him, Kai blast in hand stabbing forwards at Naruto's heart. The android grabbed at the attack, his fist gripping the blast on Vegeta's forearm. Then he smiled. Vegeta cried out in agony as Naruto squeezed down mightily, his large palm mercilessly crushing the Saiyan's limb. You never learn, he began slowly, snarling as he ground the bones together. Do you? You don't care about others. Only yourself. If I hadn't transformed to fight you, you'd have gone on to fight Cell, without so much as a care in the world. Even now, all you can think about is how to destroy me. But what about 18? Tighter still he squeezed. Any longer and the limb would certainly break. What about the one you let die? Naruto flung Vegeta back down, the blue-clad warrior's body slamming into the stone below. Vegeta coughed up a thick wad of blood as he bounced off the earth, his eyes squeezing shut in agony before he fell back down to the stones. He struggled to stand, the pain of a broken rib shooting throughout his body while he forced himself back to his feet. Naruto snapped into existence behind him seconds later, his hand descending faster than a falling star, and just as merciless, forcing Vegeta to become intimate with the soil in a way no one desired. Face first, he ploughed into the ground, the momentum shoving mud into his nose and stones into his eyes. Face down with another man beating your ass. Naruto barked out a laugh, landing behind him. Is it Wednesday already, Vegeta? Somewhere in the distance, Cell's laughter could be heard. Son of a bitch! Ignoring the pain in his chest, Vegeta vaulted to his feet. This boy was making a mockery of him. Again! He would not stand for it. He would not. I will not stand for this. Roaring his fury, the Prince of all Saiyan rocketed upward, engulfed in a stream of golden light. Naruto watched his foe ascend calmly, without so much as a hint of concern. He adopted a bracing stance almost on instinct. Whatever came next would have all of the prince's energy behind it. Hear me, boy, Vegeta declared, his voice thundering across the canyon like a lightning bolt. Once again, you have taken for granted the powers of a true Saiyan warrior. He thrust both arms forward, palms against palms, cupping a snarling sphere of saffron within. Now, if you really want to test your strength, stay right where you are. Naruto did just that. He stood still as a god, unflinching as the planet itself began to tremble in fear around him. Cell offered no opinion of this display. He merely frowned. Vegeta was being reckless. If he hit the planet with that, there was a good chance the Earth might— Vegeta's lost it! Piccolo exclaimed. Trunks was of a like mind. You're going to destroy the whole planet. Father! You've got to stop it! Vegeta wasn't listening. Final flash. To be frank, Naruto experienced a split second of surprise as the massive golden blast burst from Vegeta's hands. Then he felt only anger. Oi oi, that was too much energy. Was he going to be a sore loser and destroy the planet as well? He'd just enough time to fling a hand before his face before the beam barreled into him, showering the island in brilliant luminance. So fierce was the blast that it sent Trunks hurtling into the air in an eye blink, just to avoid being swallowed up by the technique. I see, he realized in a flash. He focused all his power on the android. Unbelievable, Piccolo muttered. And indeed, Vegeta had done just that, though effort had left him severely drained. He sank back to the earth, sweat beading upon his brow. There, did you like that? He rasped out. That wasn't too bad. To everyone's disbelief, the smoke cleared to reveal Naruto staring at the severed stump of his hand. You actually managed to disarm me with that. However, the muscles of his severed arm began to writhe and bulge, light flowing from his cloak and into the limb. With seconds, his hand was restored, flawless fingers fisting together to form a complete palm. Naruto shot Vegeta a sneer and started forwards once again, boots clicking against the upturned stone. Vegeta couldn't believe it, his best attack, and the blonde was still coming for him. No, this couldn't be happening. No, this couldn't be the limit of his power. Is that all, Prince? He asked. I've enjoyed our little warm-up thus far, but I think it's time we ended this farce. He raised his hand, fingers splayed. Naruto grinned. His was a visage entirely devoid of mirth. More and more he could feel himself slipping into the madness of this form, and yet he was powerless to stop it. His own anger, the very source of his newfound power, was slowly driving him insane. When you let 18 be absorbed, when I watched her die, it took a piece of me. Naruto replied. I wonder how you would feel if I took someone from you. Perhaps then, you'd be able to understand my pain. His gaze travelled to Trunks, still struggling to recover. No, he decided at last. You don't care for your son, only yourself. In that case, Vegeta's visible eye went wide as his right arm was severed from his body, the limb now falling away from him in a flash. The gloved fingers were wriggling slightly as the nerve endings within them struggled to receive signal from his brain once more, dropping the Kai blast that they once held as his hand groped on blindly. Vegeta lunged forward, his left arm stretched out in an attempt to grab and retrieve the fallen limb. Uzumaki Naruto buzzed into view, his body blocking the Saiyan's limb, Jaden eyes glaring out coldly from behind the frightening grin of his cloak. With a hiss, he swung his hand backwards, a golden blast of Kai rocketing out from the tip of his fingers and incinerating both the prince's arm and his blast within the dark energy. Deprived of his limb, Vegeta found himself choking on his own blood, unable to believe what he'd just witnessed here today. His arm! This android had just severed his arm. He! Naruto stalked after him. a cold smile wreathing his every feature. "Welcome to the end of your life," he hissed. "And I promise it's going to hurt. But how to end you? A big bang? A kamehameha? Of course, I could always use your own final flash against you." He pretended to think it over for a moment before shaking his head. "Nah, let's try mixing the two. Then maybe you'll finally know a quarter of the pain I'm feeling right now. Enjoy your trip to Otherworld." Grinning like a madman, he placed both hands apart from one another, thumbs touching, fingers stretched to their full length. Big bang. A sphere the size of his head sizzled into existence, swelling until it amassed the entire size of his body. Naruto's grin twisted itself into a stern scowl. Vegeta felt the blood rush from his face. "No!" That was too much, Kai, even for him. He couldn't possibly block that. He needed to dodge. "Get out of the way now!" And yet, despite himself, the Prince of all Saiyans found himself transfixed by fear, clutching at the bloodied stump of his arm as Naruto charged up his deadly attack. "Father!" cried Trunks. "Kamehameha!"